Chapter 1. The Hyena's Laugh. The nightmare always started the same way. Blood, screams, the scent of fire hanging heavy in the night air. I jerked awake, my body slick with sweat, chest heaving as though I'd run for miles. The digital clock beside my bed cast an eerie blue glow across my Spartan room. 3:17 a.m. The witching hour. How fitting. I threw off the thin sheet and padded to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Winter Hollow slept peacefully below, unaware of the predators that prowled among them, unaware that their beta hadn't had a full night's rest in over 2 years. 2 years since the massacre. 2 years of carrying the weight of those I couldn't save. My mind drifted, as it often did in these quiet hours, to the first time I'd visited this sleepy town, the first time I'd met her. 1 year earlier, Diana's 18th birthday. The burger joint was decorated with streamers and cheap balloons, teenagers laughing and shouting over the music. I hated every second of it. Remind me again why I agreed to this, I muttered to Raphael as we approached the entrance. Raphael clapped me on the shoulder. Because you're my best friend and you haven't left my uncle's property in weeks, you need this. What I needed was to be hunting down the Iron Fangs, the rival pack responsible for slaughtering our family. But I'd been the one pushing Raphael to pursue this Diana. I'd seen how her name alone brightened his eyes, how he'd checked his phone constantly hoping for her messages. If anyone could help heal the wounds left by the massacre, it would be her. And if she was important to Raphael, she was important to me. Pack always comes first. The moment I entered, my senses were assaulted. The smells of grease, perfume, and teenage hormones mixed in a nauseating cloud. And then, cutting through it all, a laugh. High-pitched, uninhibited, like a... I spotted the source immediately. A girl with wild curls, throwing her head back as she laughed at something another girl had said. The birthday girl, Diana, I assumed, smiled shyly beside her. Raphael's face transformed at the sight of Diana, all the tension of the past months melting away. My chest loosened at the sight. This was exactly what I'd hoped for when I'd convinced him to stop pushing her away for her own safety. My alpha deserved happiness after everything we'd lost. We made our way through the crowd. Raphael stepped beside Diana, his palm resting lightly on her lower back. I brought someone, he murmured near her ear. Diana turned, her eyes widening slightly as she took in my appearance. I knew what she saw, tall, muscular, dressed in black, my perpetual scowl firmly in place. This is Luca, Raphael said. One of my oldest friends. I gave a short nod, the most I could manage in this cacophony of noise and scent. Before Diana could say anything, the wild-haired girl stepped forward. Her eyes, sharp, assessing, narrowed at me. "You're the friend?" she asked, something like disappointment in her tone. My gaze flicked over her, taking in the defiant stance, the challenging tilt of her chin. "You're the one who laughed like a hyena outside, aren't you?" The girl's jaw dropped. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, and I already feel like I've heard too much of your voice." "Excuse me," she snapped. "You're excused." The girl bristled, hands on her hips. "Wow, rude and arrogant. Did you come out of the womb this irritating, or is it something you practiced?" Something unfamiliar stirred in my chest, amusement. I was trained by professionals. Let me guess, prison guards. Despite myself, I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. The girl caught it, her eyes flashing with triumph. Diana turned to Raphael, whispering something I pretended not to hear. "They're going to kill each other." Raphael chuckled. "Or end up making out in a supply closet." "Doubtful," Diana replied, but she didn't sound convinced. Later, as we were leaving, Raphael finally supplied the information I hadn't asked for. "Her name is Maddie, by the way. Diana's best friend since kindergarten." "I don't care," I replied, shoving my hands into my pockets. "She got under your skin." "She's annoying." Raphael grinned. "You smiled. I haven't seen you smile since." "Don't," I cut him off. Just don't. We walked in silence back to the car, but I couldn't shake the echo of that laugh from my mind. Like a hyena, yes, but something about it had broken through the wall of grief and rage I'd built around myself. Just for a moment. Maddie, the name felt like a splinter under my skin. Present day. The memory faded as I watched the sun begin to rise over Winter Hollow. 4 years since that night. 4 years of running into Maddie at every turn, at the cafe, at pack gatherings, at Raphael and Diana's wedding. 4 years of bickering and snide comments, and that insufferable laugh that still managed to cut through my defenses. My phone buzzed with a message from Raphael. Council meeting, 9 a.m. Something's come up. I frowned. Raphael wasn't one for cryptic messages. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. I showered quickly, dressed in my usual black, and headed downstairs. There would be no more sleep today. There never was after the nightmare. As I stepped outside, something prickled at the back of my neck, a feeling I hadn't experienced since the night of the massacre. We were being watched. Winter Hollow had been safe for years. But as I scanned the tree line, my wolf senses on high alert, I couldn't shake the feeling that our peace was about to be shattered. And somehow, I knew that insufferable human woman with the hyena laugh would be right in the middle of it. Chapter 2, The Last Pastry. 8 months ago, Snowdrop Cafe. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped into the Snowdrop Cafe, the warmth and scent of cinnamon-soaked sugar cutting through the early spring chill. The place was as I remembered, cozy, crowded, and a little too loud. I preferred silence. Still, the cafe served the best hot cocoa in Winter Hollow, and after another night of border patrols and uneasy sleep, I figured I deserved something warm. What I hadn't expected was her. Maddie stood at the counter, curls piled high in a messy halo that somehow still looked intentional. A bright green sweater hung off one shoulder like it belonged to someone else entirely, and her laugh, sharp, brazen, rose above the clatter of mugs and quiet indie music like a lightning bolt through fog. She didn't see me at first. Her back was to me, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet, one hand gesturing animatedly as she spoke to the barista. There was something reckless in her movements, like she might leap over the counter on a dare or spontaneously start singing just because the moment demanded it. The barista nodded toward the pastry case. Last one of the chocolate-stuffed hazelnut rolls. Maddie gasped dramatically. My pastry, the universe is finally on my side. I stepped forward, voice low and even. Actually, I called ahead, that one's mine. She froze mid-reach, turning slowly. Her eyes, brown with gold flecks, narrowed as they landed on me. You. Maddie, I said with a nod, as if she hadn't just declared a spiritual connection to a pastry. You called ahead, she repeated, dubious. Twice, I replied. I take my pastries seriously. Wow, and here I thought you only brooded in corners and glared at people for sport. Multitasking, I said dryly, very efficient. She looked from me to the pastry, then back again. You're bluffing. I know you didn't call. You strike me more as the walk-in and stare until someone leaves kind of customer. And you strike me as the type who talks her way into free drinks she didn't order. She grinned, shameless. You say that like it's a flaw. The barista glanced between us. Do you two want to split it? Maddie wrinkled her nose. Like we're in some kind of rom-com. Hard pass. I don't share food, I said flatly. We stared each other down, a full beat of silence stretching between us. The cafe noise faded for a moment and I felt it, some undercurrent of something I couldn't name. Not attraction, not exactly, but friction, electricity. And then, of course, Maddie broke it. You're lucky you're good looking, or I'd call security. I arched a brow. You think I'm good looking? She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't look so smug. I've got eyes, not taste. I didn't smile, not fully, but the corner of my mouth lifted, just barely. She sighed like I'd personally ruined her week and stepped aside. Fine. Take the stupid pastry, Mr. Broody McWolverine. Luca, I corrected. I know your name, she said, brushing past me. I just like mine better. She swept out the door without another word, curls bouncing, leaving behind a scent of vanilla and whatever chaos she carried around like perfume. I stood there for a long moment, pastry box in hand, feeling like I'd walked into a storm and somehow come out the other side changed. Present-day Snowdrop Cafe. The bell above the door chimed again. I didn't have to turn to know it was her. I was seated in the far corner, same order in front of me. Snow was falling outside now, quiet and steady. I just finished my second patrol of the week, 2 more incidents near the eastern ridge. Something was shifting in Winter Hollow, and I could feel it in my bones. But at the moment, all my senses locked onto the presence behind me. She approached the counter, boots tapping confidently. Her voice rang out. Please tell me you have at least 1 chocolate hazelnut roll. The barista gave her an apologetic look. Just sold the last one. That guy over there got it. I sipped my cocoa. She turned, her eyes found me. You again, she said, exasperated. Do you have a personal vendetta against my happiness? I leaned back in my chair, meeting her gaze with calm indifference. It's not personal. I just enjoy watching you suffer. She stalked over, coat still half-buttoned, curls wet from the snow. You are seriously the worst. You say that like it's an insult. Her eyes flicked to the box on my table, then to the empty chair across from me. She sat, uninvited. Okay, fine, 1 bite, she said, for peace. I pushed the box slightly toward her, saying nothing. She took a bite, closed her eyes briefly, then sighed. God, I hate you. The edges of my lips tugged again. She opened one eye, noticing. You smiled again. That's 2 in like 8 months. Should I alert the press? Only if they're armed. She laughed, that laugh, the same one that cut through everything. And just for a second, the quiet cafe wasn't so suffocating. Just for a second, I didn't mind the noise. We sat there a moment longer, her bright and alive, me still and silent. We didn't talk about the tension sitting thick between us, or the way our eyes lingered too long, or the fact that she now knew exactly what I was and didn't flinch. I didn't ask why she came back to this place, and she didn't ask why I never stopped. But I had the feeling we'd be colliding again, sooner than either of us was ready for.
Chapter 3, What the Night Revealed. 6 months ago. The air hung heavy, thick with tension, but it wasn't the heat that made it hard to breathe, it was the storm raging inside me. I couldn't stand watching Diana fall apart anymore. Raphael had shattered her heart, and now it was time to make him feel the consequences of what he'd done. Finding him had been harder than I anticipated. The woods seemed endless, but I was relentless. I didn't care how long it took, I was determined to get to him. And when I finally did, I found him standing on his porch, calm and cold, like he hadn't done a single thing wrong. Raphael, my voice was sharp as a knife, cutting through the air. He didn't move, didn't even flinch. I marched up the steps, anger fueling my every step. He was going to pay for what he had done to Diana. Get your ass down here and explain yourself, I yelled, furious that he could be so cold. He remained still, staring at me with those dark eyes. His silence was maddening. She's not okay, Raphael. I could feel my voice breaking as I pressed on, unwilling to hold back anymore. She's a wreck because of you, and you don't even care. What kind of man are you? She cries herself to sleep, you know? I continued, my voice rising. She still wears that pendant you gave her, and it burns her, Raphael. It burns her, but she won't take it off. That's how much she loved you. And you. I raised my fist, wanting to make him feel the weight of her pain. But before I could strike, Luca grabbed my arm. Maddie, stop, he said, his voice firm but calm. I tried to pull away, but he held me back. I didn't care about Luca right now, but I could see the concern in his eyes. It didn't matter. Raphael needed to feel the consequences of what he had done. Then I heard it, the howl. It was so loud, so chilling that I froze. I looked around, confused and scared, unable to make sense of what was happening. Before I could process it, I saw Raphael shift, his body changing in an instant, fur sprouting from his skin, his bones snapping as he morphed into a terrifying wolf. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled back. And then Luca's massive wolf form appeared beside me, silver fur glistening in the dim light. It was so fluid, so graceful, it was like nothing I had ever seen before. I couldn't tear my eyes away. Luca as a wolf was incredible. There was something so primal, so powerful about him. I wanted to reach out to pet him, but I caught myself. I couldn't get distracted by this, not now. Luca's wolf moved quickly, tearing through the wolves that had emerged from the trees, protecting me as Raphael fought back the others. It was chaos all around us, but Luca didn't stop. He stayed between me and the danger, his presence a shield. Once the battle finally died down, I stood there, still trying to process everything that had just happened. My heart was pounding in my chest. "Does Diana know?" I asked Raphael, my voice barely above a whisper. "She does," Raphael replied, his voice tinged with guilt. "But you should leave. It's not safe for someone like you here." Luca moved toward me, his face tense. He said nothing as he gestured for me to follow him. I had questions, so many questions, but I was too exhausted to ask them right now. "Luca, take her back home." Raphael's voice was cold, his eyes distant. We started walking back in silence, but Luca glanced at me, his expression hard to read. "Are you in shock?" I shook my head slowly. I don't know what to feel. The truth was, I didn't feel the way I should have. Something about Luca's wolf form had felt right. There was a connection there, something deep inside me that had clicked when I saw him as a wolf, but I couldn't focus on that now. I forced myself to ignore the feelings stirring inside me and turned my thoughts elsewhere. Luca's human form was just as impressive as his wolf. I wanted to tell him, to compliment him, but I quickly shut that thought down. This obsession, this unhealthy pull toward him, was something I needed to control. Luca's expression shifted slightly when he noticed my discomfort, but he said nothing as we continued the ride back. The sky was just beginning to lighten when we pulled up to Diana's house. He stayed quiet, brooding, as I climbed off the bike. I turned to thank him, but he was already looking away. The porch light flicked on as I stepped up. A moment later, the door creaked open. It was her mom, eyes puffy from sleep, robe cinched tight. She blinked at me, surprised. "Maddie." "Sorry, Mrs. Wills. I just need to talk to Diana." She stepped aside, nodding gently. "She's upstairs." I found Diana in her room, curled on the bed in an old hoodie, staring at the ceiling like it held the answers to every heartbreak. Her eyes drifted to me. "Maddie." I sat beside her without asking. "Hey." She sat up slightly, brushing her hair out of her face. Her eyes were tired but alert. I hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "You knew," I said, voice gentler than I expected, "about Raphael, that he's not human." Her eyes dropped. "Yeah." I let the silence hang a moment, but I didn't press. "I wish you told me." "I wanted to," she whispered, "but I didn't know how. I didn't want to drag you into something dangerous." "Well, I found out anyway," I said, trying to keep my voice light, though the memory still twisted in my chest. "Tonight, there was a fight, a full-on war in the forest, wolves everywhere. I saw Raphael shift. Luca too." Diana's breath caught. She gripped the edge of her blanket. "Wait, what, a war?" I nodded slowly. "They came out of nowhere. It was brutal. Raphael was in the thick of it. Luca protected me." "Is Raphael okay?" she asked immediately, voice tight with panic. "His pack, are they okay?" I exhaled. "He's alive, banged up, but he's still standing. Luca got me out before it was over. I don't know how bad the others were." She looked down, hands clenched in her lap, completely silent, her whole focus still on him. And watching her, how much she still cared, how deep it went despite everything, I couldn't help the thought that slipped through my head like a curse. What an idiot Raphael is to lose someone like her. Present day, Snowdrop Cafe. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped in, boots damp with snow and heart a little too loud in my chest. I didn't have to look around. He was here. Of course he was. I spotted him instantly, in the far corner, black jacket, hands wrapped around a cup, posture relaxed but somehow still coiled. Watching him was like staring at a storm that hadn't decided whether to destroy or stay quiet. God, he was beautiful. Not in the polished, pretty boy way, but sharp, stark, like something carved from shadow and wind. High cheekbones, jaw sharp enough to slice, hair tousled like it never obeyed him, but still somehow perfect. And those eyes, icy, unreadable, but deep enough to drown in if you weren't careful. And I was never careful around Luca. I cleared my throat at the counter, pretending to look at the pastry shelf. Please tell me you have at least one chocolate hazelnut roll. The barista gave me a regretful smile. Just sold the last one. That guy over there got it. Of course he did. I turned and there he was, already watching me. His lips barely curved, not quite a smile. Luca didn't smile, not really, but it was something. You again, I sighed. Do you have a personal vendetta against my happiness? He tilted his head, voice maddeningly calm. It's not personal, I just enjoy watching you suffer. I stormed over, coat dripping, fingers tingling from the cold, or maybe just from being near him again. You are seriously the worst. You say that like it's an insult. God, he made me furious. Cold, snarky, always looking at me like I was some puzzle he didn't care enough to solve, but I still kept showing up. I still kept looking. And every damn time, I found myself wanting. His lips, the tension in his jaw, the way he sat like he didn't need the world and didn't want it either. I hated it. I hated how gorgeous he was. I hated how rude he was. And I hated how I still found myself drawn to him like gravity. My eyes dropped to the pastry box on his table. You're not even going to eat it all, I muttered. He said nothing, just nudged the box toward me. I sat uninvited, unbothered. Okay, fine, one bite for peace. I tore off a piece, warm and flaky, took a bite and almost moaned. God, I hate you. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A smile, just the faintest one, but it was there. You smiled, I accused. Again, that's 2 in like 8 months. Should I alert the press? Only if they're armed. That made me laugh. It slipped out, easy and real, before I could stop it. And just for a moment, the air around us softened. He didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me with those eyes that held galaxies and graves at the same time. I didn't ask why he was always here, always alone. He didn't ask why I kept coming back. But we both knew this wasn't over, not even close. Because no matter how cold he was, how pissed off, guarded, dangerous, something in me kept reaching for him. And worse, something in me didn't want to stop.
Chapter 4, Strange Dream. The second time I had the dream, it felt even more real than the first. Flashes of light, the pull of something I couldn't explain, and the image of a girl with long, dark hair. Her face was fleeting, elusive, but there was something undeniably familiar about her. I couldn't make sense of it. It was just a dream, I told myself. A weird, inexplicable dream, nothing more. But as I stood on the training grounds the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed by something deeper. Something pulling at me, something I couldn't understand. And it only got worse when Raphael noticed the exhaustion in my eyes. You look like hell, Raphael said, his sharp eyes assessing me. Bad night. I brushed it off. It's nothing, I muttered, trying to keep my tone neutral. Just a dream. Raphael didn't buy it. He looked at me, clearly seeing through the facade. You sure? You look like you've seen something that has you second-guessing everything. I let out a breath, shifting uncomfortably. It's just a dream, I repeated, though there was an edge of uncertainty in my voice. Raphael's smirk was there, as always. A dream, huh? Maybe that dark-haired girl you've been seeing in your dreams is your mate. The word mate hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment my mind flashed to the girl from my dream, but I quickly pushed the thought away. No, it wasn't possible. It was just a dream, right? But the idea of her kept swirling in my head. Who was she? What did it mean? I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't stop myself. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Raphael seemed to sense my hesitation and gave me a knowing grin. Don't tell me you're scared of the idea, Luca. Maybe that girl is your mate. I bristled, shaking my head. It's not her, I snapped, but there was a tightness in my voice. Raphael's gaze softened, and he just gave me a knowing look. Whatever you say, but you're looking awfully conflicted for someone who doesn't care. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. The idea that someone could be my mate, let alone the girl from my dream, didn't sit well with me. I didn't need any of that. The conversation shifted, and we moved on to other matters: Kyan, the new member of the pack, and his smooth entry into our ranks. He was a young guy, about 20, not too much younger than me or Raphael, and he had this carefree vibe that made him fit right in. He had told us that his family had been banished from their old pack, and that he had been living as a loner ever since. I was just looking for a place to belong, Kyan had said. Snow skating brought me to Winter Hollow, and when I caught a glimpse of the pack, I figured I'd see if I could join. My parents gave me their blessing. He was strong, had passed all the tests, and had this charming personality that made him easy to be around. Still, there was something about him that didn't sit right with me, something that felt like he was hiding something. But I didn't get any immediate warning from him, and Raphael seemed to like him, so I decided to let him in for now. We'd been training the new pack members all morning, but as the session continued, my mind kept wandering back to that damn dream. The flashes of light, the feeling of being pulled, but then something unexpected happened. I glanced up, feeling the weight of someone watching me. My gaze swept over the training grounds, landing on a figure standing just beyond the edge of the area. Maddie. She was leaning against a tree, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. It was impossible to ignore the way her gaze seemed to follow every movement, the sharpness of her focus. The intensity of it struck me in a way I didn't expect. I wasn't sure why, but there was something satisfying about seeing her there, watching me. It wasn't just that she was observing me. It was how she did it, like she was trying to figure me out. The way her eyes narrowed as I moved, the slight tilt of her head when I demonstrated a technique. It made something inside me stir, though I couldn't place the feeling. I continued my training, trying to shake the feeling off, but her presence remained, lingering in the back of my mind. I caught myself showing off a little more than I usually would, pushing harder in the drills, moving faster, more precisely. It was as if I wanted to prove something to her, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. And then, as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. She walked off, disappearing into the trees, and for a moment I felt an unexpected sense of loss. No, it was just her being there, that's all. Still, I couldn't help but wonder why her watching me felt so damn satisfying. Chapter 5: Shadows of the Past. I didn't expect it to happen so soon, but when the witch showed up in Winter Hollow, the tension in the air was palpable. Her name was Selene, and she was the coven leader, a position usually held by someone older and more seasoned. But not her. Despite her youth, there was an undeniable maturity about her, an air of diplomacy that made Raphael's skepticism fade, albeit reluctantly. "I don't like this," Raphael grumbled as we sat in the pack's meeting room, the sound of his fingers tapping against the table in frustration. "A coven leader coming to our territory wanting peace. What's her game?" "I'm not sure," I replied, my gaze shifting to Selene as she stood across from Raphael. "But she doesn't seem like the type to stir up trouble. She's calm, collected. A bit too diplomatic for my liking, actually." Selene was a striking figure. Her long blonde hair cascaded around her shoulders, her eyes sharp and intelligent, never giving away her true thoughts. Despite her youth, she held the room with ease. There was a quiet confidence in her demeanor, a maturity that felt far beyond her years. She spoke with Raphael, offering a pact of peaceful coexistence between our pack and her coven. Raphael, as expected, was skeptical, but there wasn't a lot he could do about it. Selene had a way of making her case, speaking with logic and reason that was hard to argue against. "You have no choice in the matter, Alpha," she said softly but firmly. "We want peace, and I believe our coven can contribute to that." Raphael sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Fine," he muttered, his frustration clear. "We'll have an agreement, but if you cross us..." Don't worry, Selene interrupted, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. I'm not here to cause trouble, but I will defend my people. And just like that, it was settled. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I had learned long ago that some things were out of my control. I nodded in acknowledgement, my gaze shifting to Kyan, who had been silently observing the conversation. His presence was always calming, a reminder that not everything was a battlefield. Later that day, when training began, I found myself sparring with Kyan. He was only 3 years younger than me, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made him feel like a peer. His boyish charm made him approachable, but beneath that, he was tough as hell. He fought with a strength that nearly matched mine, and though he had the demeanor of someone who didn't take things too seriously, when we went at it, he was all focus. He had a natural ease to him, but when we went at it, there was a fire in his eyes. "You're getting better," I said, stepping back to catch my breath. Kyan wiped sweat from his brow, grinning. "You were holding back," he teased, his tone light. "I thought I was gonna get to see the real Luca today." I laughed softly, shaking my head. Maybe next time. But it was true, he was improving faster than I had expected. He had the potential to be a great asset to the pack, and I was starting to get used to his presence. By the time the dinner with the coven rolled around, I wasn't in the best mood. I didn't like the idea of dining with a bunch of witches, especially after Raphael's comments about peace and diplomacy. But as soon as I walked into the room, my gaze locked onto one person. Sorry. The girl from my dreams. The one with dark black hair, whose silhouette had haunted my sleep for weeks. The one I hadn't seen clearly, but her form, her figure, everything about her felt so familiar, as if I had known her for years. My head began to throb again, a sharp pain behind my eyes as if the vision was pulling me in. She wasn't just a dream, though. She was real, standing in front of me in the flesh, as if the universe had collided these two worlds together. I couldn't look away from her. She had the same innocent eyes, the same energy I had felt in my dreams. She didn't seem to notice my staring at first, but then her gaze met mine and I felt it. Something deep inside me shifted. Later that evening, when the room had quieted, Selene introduced her to the group. "This is Melinda," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "One of my coven members. She has recently joined us after some events." Melinda. That was her name. The girl from my dreams, the one who haunted my thoughts, was standing right in front of me. I couldn't tear my gaze away. My heart began to beat faster. She noticed me watching, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but the tension between us was undeniable. I excused myself later from the conversation, my mind too muddled to focus on anything else. I needed some space, some clarity. But the moment I stepped outside into the crisp night air, I found myself face to face with her. She had followed me. "Luca," she said quietly, her voice like a soft breeze. "Can we talk?" My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, and there, beneath the stars, we spoke. When she reached for me, her hand brushed against mine. A spark like a live wire shot through me. My breath caught and I froze. "I know you felt it too," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm your mate." The word felt foreign on my tongue, a shock to my system. "What?" I asked, my voice a rough whisper, the weight of the word feeling like a burden I wasn't ready to bear. "I'm your mate," she repeated, this time with more certainty. "I can feel it, you're just blocked." "Blocked," I repeated, stepping back almost instinctively. The flood of emotions from my past, from my father, came rushing forward, memories of trauma and pain that I had buried deep. "What do you mean, blocked?" She hesitated for a moment, her expression softening. "Something in your past. It's blocking you from recognizing me. You went through something painful, but I believe you, Luca. You are my mate." Her words sent a tremor through me. I didn't want to believe it, not yet. I was still trying to figure out how this was even possible, but something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke, made me believe her. The connection between us was real, undeniable. I wanted to run from it, to deny it, but deep down I knew I couldn't. Her touch, her presence, it was all too powerful. Flashback to the past. My father was a loner. He wasn't part of any pack, just a wild, untamed beast who wandered from place to place, never staying long enough to make a difference. He was violent, cruel, and had no care for anything but himself. I watched him hurt my mother for years, and I hated him for it. She was kind, gentle, loving. She was my world. But to him, she was nothing more than a possession, something to use and discard when it suited him. He would sleep with random human females, taking them as though they meant nothing. But then he made the mistake of crossing Alpha Samuel of Nightshade. My father, arrogant as he was, thought he could take what he wanted. But Samuel was a true alpha, strong, fierce, unyielding. He killed my father without hesitation, but for some reason he didn't turn his back on me. He gave me refuge. Years passed and my mother died when the pack was attacked. She was an Omega, too weak to defend herself. But Samuel, that man who had given me everything, took me under his wing. Raphael, Samuel's son, became like my brother. I'd die for him. Present day. Now I couldn't stop thinking about Melinda. Her words echoed in my mind. I am your mate. But the trauma, the brokenness inside me, made it hard to believe. I wasn't like other wolves. I wasn't sure I could treasure her the way she deserved. My father's abuse had scarred me, and the thought of letting someone in it terrified me. But I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't be like my father. I would treat her better. I would try to heal. And maybe, just maybe, I could become the mate she deserved.
Chapter 6, Crushing Realities. It was a crisp, chilly evening as I walked through the woods toward Diana's cabin. The path was familiar, lined with towering trees and dappled sunlight. Diana and Raphael's place always felt like a sanctuary nestled deep in the heart of the forest, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature. The cabin itself was cozy, a warm glow spilling out from the windows as I approached. It was the perfect setting, peaceful and serene, just the kind of place where I could escape from the chaos of my own thoughts. But today, as I made my way there, something in the air felt different. I rounded a bend in the trail, and there he was. Luca. My heart skipped a beat. He was standing just off the path, his gaze locked on something in the distance, his dark silhouette sharp against the fading light. But what caught my attention wasn't just Luca himself, it was the woman standing beside him. A beautiful woman with long, dark hair. Her presence seemed to almost radiate something mysterious. I hadn't seen her around before, and I had a sinking feeling that she was new. Luca's gaze, usually cold and indifferent, was softer today. His eyes were focused on her with an intensity I'd never seen before, and for a split second, my stomach churned. It was an unsettling feeling, like a knot tightening deep inside me. His expression was hesitant, unsure in a way that didn't fit with the usual indifference he showed. Then, as if sensing his gaze, the woman turned. My breath caught in my throat. She was drop-dead gorgeous. At first, I hadn't noticed just how stunning she was, but now, as she turned to face me, I couldn't help but notice every detail, the way her long, dark hair framed her face, the soft elegance in her posture. But it wasn't just her beauty that caught my attention. It was the innocence in her eyes. There was something in the way she looked at Luca, as though she belonged there, as though they were already connected. My stomach twisted painfully. And then, before I could even process what was happening, her hand rested on Luca's shoulder. A simple gesture, but it was intimate, familiar. It was like a claim, and my mind raced with the weight of it. How could they already be so close? The worst part was the way she looked at me. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, it felt like she was daring me to challenge her. A cold, possessive look that sent a wave of nausea through me. He's mine. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't stand the thought of them together, of her claiming something that I had foolishly wanted for so long. My stomach rolled, and a sick feeling spread through me. I hated her in that moment. Hated everything about her, the way she looked at Luca, the way she touched him, the way she stood beside him like she had always belonged there. Without another thought, I turned on my heel and walked away, heading straight to Diana's cabin. I needed to get away from them, from the ache in my chest, from the overwhelming sense of loss. As I reached Diana's cabin, I tried to shake off the thoughts swirling in my mind. I had no reason to feel this way, I knew that. Who was she anyway? Just another werewolf, a new face. I had never seen her before, and I was sure she hadn't been in Winter Hollow long. But how had she gotten so close to Luca so quickly? They acted as though they had known each other forever. I tried to reason with myself, to push the jealousy aside, but it wasn't working. I was spiraling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Diana greeted me with her usual warm smile, but she didn't miss the change in my expression. I could feel her eyes on me, studying me carefully, though she didn't say anything at first. I forced a smile, trying to keep the facade in place, but it was weak. She didn't buy it. "I just heard something interesting," Diana said, her voice light and cheerful. "Luca found his mate." For a second, everything stopped. Time seemed to stretch on, and my heart felt like it was caught in my throat. The air suddenly felt thick and suffocating. His mate. I couldn't breathe. I felt my face pale, and I knew Diana saw it. Her grin faded slightly, her concern growing. She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Maddie, you like him, don't you?" I forced out a laugh, trying to make light of it. "Oh, please, it's nothing, just a stupid crush. I'll get over it." But the words didn't feel right. They felt hollow. A desperate attempt to cover up the pain I was feeling. I had to let go. I had to. Luca would never see me the way I wanted. He had found his mate, and that was the end of it. Diana didn't seem convinced by my attempt to brush it off, but she didn't press me further. She looked at me with concern, but I deflected, making a few more jokes. The laughter was forced, the smile fake. Inside, though, it was a different story. Inside, I was falling apart. That night, after I went to bed, I couldn't stop the tears. And that's when it hit me, the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't just a silly crush. It was something more, something real. And I had to let it go. Luca was never going to be mine. He had his mate now, and no matter how much it hurt, I had to accept that. He wasn't mine to claim, never had been. But that didn't make it any easier to let go.
Chapter 7. Duty and Dissonance. The morning light crept gently into my room, filtering through the blinds in streaks of gold. Today, I didn't have to train the young wolves or review patrol routes with Raphael. For once, my time was my own. I chose to spend it with Melinda. She was easy to be around, calm, always composed like her presence smoothed out the edges of the world. There was a gentle rhythm to her voice, like a stream gliding over stones, and a softness to her smile that reminded me of a time before my beta duties, before everything got complicated. We walked through the forest near the southern border. She held her sketchbook to her chest, occasionally stopping to draw trees or wildflowers. She loved to cook too, she told me, especially sweet pastries. Her world seemed built on quiet comforts, simple things, safe things. It was nice, and yet not real. Something about her drew me in, but not in the way I expected. There was no fire, no chaos, just this quiet pull, like fog slowly curling around me. Familiar, almost warm, but never quite clear. The longer we were together, the more that strange, dull ache formed at the base of my skull, a headache that wouldn't go away. Every time I stood too close or touched her hand, it flared. I told myself it was stress, or maybe my instincts adjusting to the new bond. Maybe the bond needed time to grow. She was kind, beautiful. Any wolf would be lucky to call her mate. I kept repeating that in my head. I could grow to care for her. Maybe I already did in a way. Then I felt it. That shift in the air, that unmistakable energy. Turn. I turned. Maddie was walking down the forest path, likely returning from Diana and Raphael's cabin hidden deeper in the woods. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened, and the blood drained from her face. For the first time in all the moons I'd known her, she said nothing. The wild, loud, relentless girl, completely silent. She just looked, and I felt her pain like a punch to my chest. Then she walked past us, didn't say a word, didn't yell, didn't argue. Just walked away. And that hurt more than I expected. I wanted to call her name, to explain, but I didn't move. I couldn't, not with Melinda standing beside me, her hand brushing mine, grounding me to the role I was meant to fill. Maddie and I had our moments, fights, flirtations, that strange current I never quite understood, but that's all it was, right? Wasn't it? Still, something inside me twisted when she turned away like I was a stranger, like I'd never mattered at all. Melinda looked up at me then, smiling gently, unaware of the war inside my head. She was my mate. That's what everyone said. That's what the moon goddess had decided. And I would honor that, even if something about it felt wrong.
Chapter 8, Not Mine to Lose. I stopped going to Diana's place. It wasn't like I said it out loud or made some dramatic vow. I just didn't. When she called, I said I was busy, which wasn't a lie. I had taken extra shifts at the clinic. Stocking meds, helping with inventory, anything to keep my hands occupied and my mind somewhere, anywhere else. Being a pharmacy trainee had always been part of the plan, but now it was more than a job. It was a distraction, a lifeline, a way to avoid places and people that reminded me of him. Because I felt like I'd lost something. Which was ridiculous, wasn't it? Luca was never mine. I wasn't a wolf. I didn't have a mate bond to stake a claim with. All I had was a stupid, fluttery crush that got way too tangled in my chest without permission. I thought I knew the limits of it, thought I was just infatuated with the idea of him. His strength, his smirk. The way he challenged me, annoyed me, pulled me in like a storm I couldn't resist. But now that he had someone else, someone real, it felt like a part of me had been scooped out and left in the cold. I didn't even realize how deep I'd fallen until I saw them. It was snowing that evening. The sky low and gray, the kind of evening where your breath lingered in front of your lips longer than usual. I was walking home, arms full of prescriptions for morning delivery, when I passed Snowdrop Cafe. Our cafe. It was silly to think of it like that, but it had felt like hours, where we'd bicker over pastries, where he'd steal the last cinnamon twist just to watch me lose it, where we shared laughs that lingered longer than they should have. I was halfway past when something caught my eye through the fogged-up window. Luca, sitting at our usual corner table. But he wasn't alone. She sat across from him, his mate, Melinda. Her long dark hair brushed gently over her shoulder, and she was laughing at something he'd said. He was smiling too, soft and distracted, like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. My breath hitched. It felt like being punched. That place held memories, quiet ones, messy ones, but they were ours. And now he'd brought her there, as if none of it had meant anything. I turned away quickly, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. I may not be a wolf, but I'd seen what the bond looked like. I'd seen Raphael and Diana, how their eyes always found each other in a room, how they were drawn together like gravity itself bent for them. If that's what awaited Luca and his mate. If that's what he would feel for her. It shattered something inside me. I didn't realize I'd teared up until the wind stung my cheeks, and I wiped them away, brushing the moisture like it didn't matter. It did. But I'd survive it. I walked faster, leaving the cafe behind, leaving him behind. And somewhere between one step and the next, I swore to myself I would get over it. Even if it broke me a little to do it. Chapter 9, A Moment to Breathe. I texted Diana to meet in town. I told her I was running errands, but the truth was, I just didn't want to go to her cabin. Not yet. Not while everything in that place reminded me of him. We met outside the tiny bakery near the town square, a cozy spot with flower boxes in the windows and the smell of cinnamon hanging in the air. I was already seated at a table by the window when she arrived, looking like a breath of calm in my otherwise chaotic thoughts. "Busy girl," she teased as she hugged me. "I've missed you." I smiled, brushing off the concern in her eyes. "Just work. The pharmacy's been keeping me on my toes." We ordered coffee and pastries and sat there for a while, pretending everything was normal. And slowly, things did start to feel better. not whole, but lighter. Diana talked about her married life, about Raphael. Her face lit up when she mentioned him. She spoke about their inside jokes, about how he had turned their living room into a training space once during a snowstorm, and how he still checked if she had enough blankets at night, even when it was warm. It sounded simple and real. She talked about being Luna, not in the way most dreamt about, but the everyday version. The duty, the exhaustion, the joy. It was love and loyalty and laughter all tangled together. I was genuinely happy for her. After we parted ways with warm smiles and promises to do it again soon, I wandered through the quiet streets. The sky was turning lavender when I ran into him. Kyan. I recognized him instantly from Diana's cabin. Tall, effortlessly handsome, his features lit by that easygoing smile that made people want to talk to him. "You're Maddie, right?" he said, stopping in front of me. "Depends who's asking." He laughed. "Kyan, we met once at Diana's. You were the loud one." "You remember that?" "You're hard to forget." There was a pause, not awkward, just comfortable. "I'm guessing you don't have dinner plans." I blinked. "Are you asking because you're bored or because you think I am?" "Both." I should have said no. I wasn't really in the mood. But something about Kyan, his ease, his warmth, felt like just the distraction I needed. "All right, impress me." We ended up at this tiny ramen place on the corner of town, small, a little too warm inside, with steamy windows and mismatched bowls. It was perfect. We laughed too loudly, talked about the weirdest things. People stared, but neither of us cared. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Luca. I was just Maddie, sitting across from a guy with kind eyes, slurping ramen, and remembering that the world wasn't ending. For a little while, the ache inside me faded. And that felt like a beginning.
Chapter 10, Restless Edges. The sun was brutal this morning, beating down on the training field as if daring us to slack off. I barked commands at the new recruits, watching their forms, adjusting their stance, correcting posture. These kids had potential, but raw strength without discipline was just chaos. Melinda sat on a nearby bench, her sundress fluttering in the breeze. She had brought baked goods again, blueberry muffins this time, and handed them out with her usual quiet smile. The warriors loved her for it. I was beginning to feel comfortable around her. She didn't demand attention or push boundaries. She just was, soft-spoken, feminine, sweet in a way that made people instantly trust her. And somehow, even if my head ached after long conversations with her, I couldn't deny that her presence had become familiar. Still, something always tugged at me, something unsettled under the calm. Kyan walked over, spinning his practice sword with a smirk. "Ready to be embarrassed, old man." I chuckled, "You wish." We started sparring, the rhythmic clanging of our weapons echoing across the grounds. We moved fast, exchanging blows, the recruits pausing to watch us. And then he said her name. "By the way, I ran into Maddie. We had dinner the other night. That girl's hilarious. Haven't laughed that hard in a while." My grip faltered for a split second. I hadn't seen her in what felt like months. I told myself it didn't matter. She wasn't mine. But hearing about her, laughing with someone else, made something inside me twist painfully. "She's kind of great, you know, loud, unapologetically herself. Totally refreshing," Kyan added with a grin. I swung harder. Kyan blocked the blow with ease, raising a brow. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he noticed the shift in me. His posture adjusted. He stopped holding back. The sparring turned serious. For a few intense minutes, we moved like fire and stone, colliding over and over. No one said a word, but the tension thickened. And Kyan, he held his own, better than before. He was getting stronger. Before it could spiral further, my phone buzzed. "Raphael." I stepped aside and answered. "Dinner at my place tonight," he said. "Diana's cooking, come by." I hesitated, then asked, "Can I bring Melinda?" "Of course," he replied easily. "See you both tonight." The call ended, but the static in my chest didn't. I looked back at Melinda, who was now chatting with one of the younger trainees, her hands dusted with flour from the muffins. And yet, all I could think about was Maddie. Where was she now? Why did I care so damn much? I shook my head, pushing the thought away. I had made my choice. Melinda was my mate, kind, patient, good. So why did the ache in my chest feel like guilt?
Chapter 11, Shattered Illusions. More than a month had passed, and I hadn't set foot near Diana's cabin. She had called a few times, inviting me over, but I always gave the same excuse: I was busy. Pharmacy shifts, certification training, volunteering, anything to keep my mind off things. Off him. It was foolish, really. How could I miss something that had never been mine? But that was exactly how it felt. Like I had lost something I didn't even know I cared so deeply about. Tonight, though, I was out of excuses. Diana was hosting a dinner and hadn't taken no for an answer. So I put on my best I'm totally fine mask and walked the familiar path to their beautiful cabin nestled in the woods. When I arrived, no one else had shown up yet. I helped Diana and Raphael set the table, sharing small laughs and quiet smiles. It felt safe for a moment. Then they walked in. Her arm was looped through his, Luca and Melinda. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and it felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. She smiled up at him, served him food with such care, her movements soft and elegant. She was all grace and gentleness, feminine to her core. But when her eyes landed on me, they sharpened, hardened. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to know she sensed it, whatever I had once felt for Luca. And honestly, if I were in her shoes, I'd feel the same. So I stopped looking his way. Still, I could feel his eyes on me more than once during dinner, but I never returned the glance. I focused on the people around me, on Diana's warmth and Raphael's steady calm. Then Diana made her announcement. She was pregnant. I squealed before I could stop myself, practically tackled her in a hug, shouting over everyone else. Kyan laughed, teasing me about being the loudest one there. He said it like he liked it. Later, while helping Raphael with the final round of barbecue, I wandered to the back to grab more wood, and that's when I saw them. Her hand was in his hair, stroking gently, tenderly, like he was something precious and fragile. His hands rested on her waist, pulling her close, grounding her. And then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't stolen. It was the kind of kiss that spoke of shared secrets, of trust, of belonging. Their foreheads brushed for a second before he leaned in, their lips meeting in a soft, intimate rhythm that felt far too sacred for anyone else to witness. My breath caught. I felt the world lurch beneath me. It wasn't the kiss itself that broke me, it was what it meant. That he had chosen, that he had moved on, that whatever quiet, foolish hope I'd nursed in my chest had been nothing but a fragile illusion. The ache hit me like a tidal wave, fierce, suffocating. My hands trembled. My throat tightened so hard it hurt to swallow. I felt like someone had reached inside and carved something essential out of me. I wasn't a wolf, but in that moment, I understood the howl of heartbreak, the silent scream of loss that no one else could see. I stood frozen, too stunned to turn away, too shattered to pretend I hadn't seen it. My eyes burned, not with tears, but with the sharp, stinging pain of reality snapping into focus. And then I heard a soft voice behind me. Maddie. Kyan. I turned quickly, blinking hard, willing the pain to vanish from my face. But I saw it register in his eyes, the shift, the sadness, the way he immediately stepped closer. You okay? He asked, his tone gentle but firm like he knew I was. I nodded, but it was a lie. Walk, I whispered. He didn't question it, just nodded and fell in step beside me, his presence quiet, steady, and kind. We didn't talk about what I saw. He didn't try to fix it. He just let me breathe beside him, offering his warmth like a buffer between me and the ache clawing at my chest. And when he cracked a joke about me hugging Diana like a linebacker, I laughed, broken and breathless, but grateful. Because in that moment, he gave me exactly what I needed. And when we returned, saying our goodbyes, I felt Luca's stare pierce through the dusk. His eyes found mine, narrowed at the sight of me beside Kyan. They were cold, judging. But I was done explaining myself. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching, then turned my back. I had already lost him. I wasn't going to lose myself, too.
Chapter 12, Shadows in the Quiet. Raphael. The land outside our borders had been unnervingly quiet lately. Too quiet, I thought. It had been months since I'd fought the Iron Fang Alpha, since I'd ended him in a one-on-one battle, an act that still felt too raw in my mind. I hated how unsettled it made me. I knew the pack had surrendered after that, but that didn't mean they had let go of their thirst for revenge. There were too many rumors circulating, whispers on the wind that didn't sit right with me. I tried to push them away, but they lingered like a thick fog I couldn't shake. And then there was the matter of Diana. Pregnant with our child, she had a softness to her that I hadn't seen in her before. I couldn't help but feel protective of her, even though she was far stronger than most would ever give her credit for. But the constant threat hanging over us was always there. She was everything to me now, and the thought of anything happening to her, well, it kept me up at night. That's when I noticed it, the strange occurrences at the border. It had been months since we had any real issues, and I had convinced myself that the peace had returned. But when I led the pack on patrol last night, I sensed something out of place. The air felt wrong. It was like the stillness held an undercurrent of something far more dangerous, something waiting. I couldn't put my finger on it. I hated that feeling. As an alpha, I was supposed to be able to read the land, the people, the tension in the air, but I felt disconnected. I didn't know if it was because of the aftermath of the battle with Iron Fang or if it was something more. I couldn't trust my gut on this one, not yet. But what I did know was that Luca was acting off. It was subtle, but I noticed. He seemed distracted more so than usual, and that wasn't like him. I had seen it at the dinner when Melinda had been practically glued to his side, her hand resting on his arm too often, her voice a little too smooth when she spoke. It was almost as if she was too nice, and something in the way she smiled made my instincts prickle. I trusted Luca like a brother, and I would never question his mate lightly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Melinda had always been pleasant to me, but her kindness felt forced, almost rehearsed. The way she laughed, the way she always knew exactly what to say, it felt unnatural, and that unsettled me more than I cared to admit. I tried to brush it off. After all, she was Luca's mate, and they were both going through a lot with the growing tensions at the borders. It made sense that he'd be distracted, but the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I was just making mountains out of molehills. My mind kept drifting back to the Witch Coven. We had done our research when Melinda first came into the picture, background checks, Coven history, but nothing unusual had shown up. They were a respected faction. At least that's what they wanted us to believe. But I knew there was something more to it. I couldn't put the pieces together yet, but I needed to know. I had to dig deeper. It was my job as an alpha to protect my pack, to protect my family, even if it meant looking into the one person who could destroy the very thing I held closest. That night, I found myself in the study, my mind heavy with questions. Diana was resting, her hands gently cradling her swollen belly as she fell asleep. I didn't want to worry her, but I couldn't ignore the pull inside me that told me something wasn't right. I pulled up the files we had on the Coven, hoping to find something I had missed in my earlier searches. Everything seemed pristine, clean, too clean. There was no trace of anything out of place, nothing that would suggest a hidden agenda or any motive beyond what they showed on the surface. I couldn't stop myself from pushing further. I made some discreet calls, digging deeper into their history. It wasn't illegal to do so, but it wasn't a path I usually took. I didn't like playing games with trust, but Melinda was important to Luca, and I needed to make sure there was no danger hiding in the shadows. As I sat there, the weight of my decisions pressed down on me. I had made a promise to protect my pack, my people, and that meant doing whatever it took, even if that meant questioning my best friend's mate. I sat back in my chair, my fingers pressed against my temples, trying to focus. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't name, and yet, despite the absence of concrete evidence, something about Melinda still felt wrong. It was the little things, the way she always seemed to be watching me, observing me more than I ever realized. Or how she'd always deflected questions with that smile of hers, never answering directly. I had seen that look before in people who were hiding something. It wasn't blatant, but it was there. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just her, it was everything around her. There was an overwhelming sense of unease that I hadn't noticed until now, like a veil of smoke hanging between us. I would never let anything happen to Luca, but I had to be sure. I had to know if Melinda was truly the person she seemed to be, or if something more dangerous was hiding beneath her perfect exterior. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion sinking into my bones, but my mind raced. I wasn't going to let this go. Whatever was happening, I would figure it out, for Luca, for the pack, for my family.
Chapter 13. Tugged by the Past. It had been a strange few days. My head had been aching more than usual, a dull throb that wouldn't go away, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. The more I fought it, the worse it seemed to get. I found myself snapping at people more than I should have, and it wasn't like me. But it wasn't just the headache that had me on edge, it was Raphael. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. There was an unease in the air whenever he was around Melinda, a tension I couldn't quite pinpoint. He would glance at her like he was unsure of something, like there was something he wasn't saying. I noticed it most during meals. He would sit a little straighter, his eyes darting from Melinda to the table, never quite lingering on her. He wasn't hostile, but the discomfort was undeniable, and it made me uncomfortable too. I tried to push it away. Raphael was my best friend, my brother. He was probably just being protective. He had always been like that, an alpha to the core, always watching over his pack. But there was something in his eyes when he'd look at Melinda. Maybe I was just overthinking it. I often did. We were having a drink in the study when I finally decided to confront him about it. "Hey, Raph, you okay?" I asked casually, trying to sound nonchalant. "You've been acting weird around Melinda lately. Everything good?" Raphael didn't look up from his drink, his jaw tensing for just a moment before he shrugged. "Yeah, nothing much, just thinking about a few things." I was about to press further when I noticed a flicker of discomfort in his eyes, something that made me stop. It wasn't like him to hide anything from me, but before I could comment on it, I added almost offhandedly, "I've been having these headaches. They won't go away, probably nothing." Raphael's hand froze halfway to his glass, and I saw his posture shift slightly as if he were about to say something. But then, just as quickly, he brushed it off. "Headaches. You should get that checked out. No need to ignore it." His sharp reaction left me confused. He didn't say anything else, just went back to drinking as if nothing had happened. I watched him for a moment, trying to read him, but he was already back to his usual self, the edge in his demeanor gone. I let it slide. It wasn't like me to dwell on things, but as I turned to leave, the thought lingered. What was Raphael really worried about? And why had he reacted so strongly to something so simple? I pushed the thought aside. Today was supposed to be about me getting out of my own head. I needed a distraction. That's how I ended up at the Snowdrop Cafe. It used to be a regular spot for me, a place where I could escape the world for a while. I had used to come here often, especially in the winter, and I always knew exactly when Maddie would show up, usually a few minutes after I did, just in time for the hot cocoa. We'd talk, laugh, argue, and maybe even make up again. It had always been our place, our little tradition. But recently, I'd avoided it. The memories had become too much to handle. Today, though, I couldn't help myself. The headache was bad, and I told myself I just needed the warmth of the cocoa, nothing more. It was a silly excuse, I knew, but it was the best I had. I sat in our usual corner, my fingers tapping against the table as I waited, trying not to look too eager. Minutes passed, then half an hour. I checked my watch again, frowning. She was late. That wasn't like her. I told myself it was fine. I was fine. I didn't need to see her. I didn't need to talk to her. But the disappointment that swept over me when I realized she wasn't going to show up hit harder than I expected. I stood, preparing to leave, when the door creaked open. There she was. Maddie. She didn't say anything as she walked in, and something about her demeanor was different. She was quieter, softer almost. The usual fire that was always in her eyes was missing. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should approach her or not. "Hi," I said, my voice catching in a way I hadn't intended. She met my gaze but didn't smile. She just nodded politely, her lips pressed together in a tight line. "How have you been?" I asked, trying to make conversation. I didn't know why, but my heart was racing in a way that wasn't normal. She gave a soft, polite response. "I've been well, thank you." Something about that answer stung, and I couldn't figure out why. She had always been bold, always willing to argue with me, to pick a fight. But now she was calm, reserved, almost distant. It was nothing like the Maddie I used to know. "I'm surprised to see you here today," I said, forcing a smile, my mind racing. "I thought you'd be busy." "I just needed some time alone," she said, her voice low, almost too controlled. There was a pause. I tried to push away the uncomfortable feeling stirring in my chest, but it wouldn't go away. The Maddie I knew would have never been so detached. This polite, distant version of her made my stomach churn. I could feel the tension growing between us, thick and heavy. I reached out almost instinctively. "Maddie, what's going on with you? Why are you?" She interrupted me with a quick, soft, "I have to go." And just like that, she turned and walked out of the cafe without another word. I stood there, staring after her, my mind reeling. I had so many questions, but none of them made sense. Why was she so different? Why wasn't she fighting me like usual? What had happened to the Maddie I knew? And why did it feel like a part of me was missing when she left? Chapter 14. The Shadow of War. The air in the pack house felt thick with tension. The attack on the northern border wasn't just a physical breach. It had breached something much deeper, my sense of security. I could feel the weight of it in every step I took, in every glance exchanged among the pack. Something was coming, and it wasn't just a rogue wolf or a group of unruly rebels. Whoever did this, they knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't chance. It was a calculated strike. I was trying to focus, trying to sift through the reports, but my mind kept wandering. Too much was at stake. And then the sound of footsteps broke through my thoughts. I didn't need to turn to know it was her. Luca, Melinda's voice was soft but insistent as she entered my office, her eyes narrowing as she took in the maps and scattered reports on the table. "You're shutting me out." I clenched my jaw. There it was again. The underlying tension between us, something unspoken but unmistakable. She wasn't part of the pack, not yet anyway, and lately I'd felt her prying for information I wasn't sure she was ready for, or that I was willing to give. "Melinda, this isn't the time," I said, my tone flat, cutting through the quiet. Her eyes flashed with frustration and she took a step closer. "You're pushing me away. You've been distant ever since everything started changing." "I'm not pushing you away," I said quickly, though I felt the lie settle uneasily in my chest. "I'm just dealing with things right now that require my full attention." She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing with a mix of curiosity and concern. "What things, Luca? You've been shutting everyone out. You think I don't notice?" I turned away from her, looking back at the reports. "It's pack business, Melinda. You wouldn't understand." Her voice softened, but the edge was still there. "I want to help. You don't have to do this alone. I've been here, I've stood by your side. Don't push me away now." I clenched my fists. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't afford to get too close. Not now, not when the walls around us were crumbling. She wasn't part of the pack yet, and that had begun to feel like more of a divide than I'd allowed myself to realize. "You don't understand," I muttered, my voice low. I turned to face her, feeling the frustration build. "This isn't just about us. There are things happening that you don't need to know about. I can't share everything with you right now." Her expression faltered, a mix of hurt and confusion flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could say anything more. "Not now, Melinda, not until I know what's really going on." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Please." I could see the hurt in her eyes, but I didn't have the luxury of time to comfort her. The pack needed me. I needed to be focused, and I couldn't risk any distractions. She bit her lip, obviously fighting the urge to say something, but instead she simply nodded, turning on her heel and leaving the room without another word. I stood there for a moment, the silence in the room thickening. I didn't want things to be like this between us, but I couldn't afford to let her in on this, not with the threat looming so close. She wasn't part of the pack yet, and that had begun to feel like more of a divide than I'd allowed myself to realize. The pack needed me now, and everything else had to wait. even her. Later that evening, we gathered in Raphael's office for an urgent meeting. The room was already filled with high-ranking pack members, Kyan, our strategist, May, the lead enforcer, and a few other trusted members. But tonight something felt off. The air was dense, thick with anticipation. Raphael stood at the head of the table, his face tight with concern. As the pack's alpha, he had a way of commanding attention, even when the situation didn't call for it. But tonight, his unease was palpable. Before we could begin, the door opened, and a figure stepped inside. A woman I recognized, though we hadn't spoken much. She was tall, with sharp features and a gaze that seemed to see right through you. Her presence was undeniable, and yet there was something unsettling about her. "This is Iris," Raphael said, his voice a little too calm considering the circumstances. "The daughter of my uncle, a lone wolf who helped us when Nightshade was attacked by the Iron Fangs. After our pack was wiped out, her father stepped in and supported us. When we grew stronger, he returned to his solitary life. And Iris, following suit, has remained a lone wolf, though she's heard of our troubles and decided to come to us." Iris caught my gaze briefly, and I gave her a nod of acknowledgement. I didn't know her deeply. She was a lone wolf, just like her father. But I knew she'd played an important role in supporting Raphael's pack in the past. Now, her return felt like another warning sign. Her eyes scanned the room briefly before she spoke, her voice low but clear. "We've been attacked." The words hit harder than anything I'd expected. My heart skipped a beat. "We were strong," she continued, "but the assault was unexpected. We fought back fiercely, but the numbers, they were overwhelming. It felt like they knew exactly where to strike, where our defenses were weakest." Raphael leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Did you recognize them? Was it the Iron Fangs again?" Iris shook her head. "No, this felt different. They were organized, too organized. Whoever they are, they've been watching us." The room went silent, the weight of her words settling over us. "Stay inside pack territory," Raphael instructed, his tone urgent. "We'll fortify the borders. You're safer here with us." But as she nodded and turned to leave, my mind was spinning. A rogue attack. I didn't buy it. This felt like something much bigger, something far more calculated. And that's when the true weight of it all hit me. The attacks on the border, the strange feeling in the air. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something much darker.
Chapter 15, something like letting go. The autumn air was crisp as I made my way to Diana's cottage, arms full of warm honey pastries and a jar of pickled plums. Pregnancy cravings were unpredictable, but Diana had mentioned both last night, and I wasn't about to let my best friend suffer through her mood swings without backup. I felt lucky, honestly, lucky that I hadn't run into Luca on the way. Not because I was angry, not anymore. That would have been easier. It was the kind of hurt that didn't boil over, just settled deep in your chest, quiet and constant. We never had anything real, not officially. But there had been something, small, maybe, but alive. And when I realized I'd started to really like him, really feel something, it was too late. The announcement of his mate had closed whatever door might have existed between us. I didn't blame him. I wasn't even sure he knew what I felt. Still, part of me had to pretend it didn't matter, especially now. Diana opened the door before I even knocked. Her hair was a mess, her sweater half-buttoned, and her face lit up when she saw the pastries. "Oh, thank the moon goddess, you're my favorite person today." "I better be," I grinned, stepping inside. "You have no idea how weird it was asking for pickled plums and honey pastries at the same time." She snorted, "Blame the kid, he's already got weird taste." We settled in the kitchen, and I watched her devour 2 pastries in record time before she finally slowed down. There was tension in her shoulders, though more than the usual fatigue. Her eyes were distant. "Hey," I asked gently, "everything all right?" Diana hesitated. "It's Raphael. He's been busy lately, always in meetings, always distracted. I asked him about it and he just said things were under control." That's what mates say when things are very much not under control. "I know," she gave a nervous laugh. He doesn't want to stress me out, but I can feel it, Maddie. Something's wrong. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. He's trying to protect you, but if he's not talking, it means he doesn't want you involved. Not because he doesn't trust you, because he loves you. I wish he'd realize not knowing makes it worse. We talked for a while longer, shifting to easier topics. I did my best to distract her with gossip, a few ridiculous stories about pack drama, and a particularly dramatic retelling of the time I fell into the river during training. Her laughter came slower than usual, but it came, and that felt like something. Later, as I was leaving, I caught sight of a familiar figure near the patrol barracks. Luca. He stood by the edge of the training grounds, eyes fixed on something far away. Tension coiled in every line of his body, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, hands clenched at his sides. I hadn't spoken to him properly since the day everything changed. But something about the look on his face made me stop. Luca, I called softly. He turned, surprised. Maddie. You all right? He paused. I'm holding on. That seemed to be his answer for everything lately. I walked a few steps closer, careful to keep my tone light. Try not to let the world burn down while Diana and I are discussing pastry superiority. A flicker of a smile crossed his face, brief but real. I'll do my best. We stood there in silence, not quite close, not quite strangers. The warmth we'd once had, those teasing remarks, that low buzz of unspoken maybe was gone, or buried at least. Still, I found myself saying, I heard about your mate. Congratulations. His expression shifted. There was something in his eyes, uncertainty, awkwardness. Thanks. That was it. She seems interesting. She is, he said quietly. I didn't press, I couldn't. Whatever they had, it wasn't mine to question. I nodded, well, see you around. He gave a small nod, and I turned back toward the path. As I walked, the old ache stirred again. The truth was, I had fallen for him quietly, stupidly, and now that chapter was done. But maybe, just maybe, the fact that Melinda wasn't around helped. I didn't feel swallowed whole anymore. It still hurt, but it didn't destroy me.
Chapter 16. Fire Beneath the Quiet. For the first time in days, the throbbing behind my eyes dulled. I hadn't realized how heavy the weight had gotten until Maddie spoke to me. Her voice, light and teasing, reminded me of a time when things were simpler, easier, before politics and territory and war crept into every corner of my life. She didn't press, didn't pry, and that small moment of normalcy, it made the storm inside settle just a little. But the calm never lasted long. Later that evening, Kyan and I took up patrol. Tensions had been rising again since the border incident. The report had called it a rogue intrusion, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Too clean, too calculated, and now I wasn't in the mood to ignore gut instincts anymore. We moved in silence, cutting through the forest like shadows. Kyan's presence beside me was steady calm. He didn't talk much, never had, but I'd started to appreciate that. He carried the kind of stillness that only came from surviving something big, something dark. Maybe that's why I didn't push him about his past. Maybe because I didn't want anyone prying into mine either. The air changed before we heard them, shifting, sharp with adrenaline and fur and metal. I caught the scent a second before the first wolf launched from the trees. Left, I barked, already ducking as another came from the right. They were everywhere. 5, 6, no more. We were outnumbered but not outmatched. Kyan moved like water, like death, his claws slicing through enemy lines with brutal precision. I was fire beside him, burning, unrelenting, fury in every strike. At one point I slipped, only for a second. A blow caught my ribs and I staggered, winded. Then Kyan was there. He moved without hesitation, spine to spine with me, covering the blind spot I hadn't even noticed. His snarl was vicious, his kill clean. That moment sealed something between us. I didn't need his past anymore. Whatever shadows followed him, I knew now, he would never let me fall, and that was enough. We brought down as many as we could. Some fled, one didn't. He was young, wild-eyed, bleeding, and he broke faster than we thought he would. Iron Fang. The name made my blood run cold. After their alpha died in the formal challenge against Raphael clean by pack law, they had surrendered. We had a treaty, a contract. They weren't supposed to attack again. But here we were. The prisoner confessed through bloodied teeth that the new leadership in Iron Fang had begun organizing under a surviving beta, one who didn't believe in surrender, one who believed in vengeance. We brought the wolf back, bruised and shackled. Raphael was already in his office, pacing when we entered. When we told him, something shifted in him. Rage, cold, quiet, and final. They signed blood, he said softly, his fingers curling into fists. They signed blood and now they break it. None of us answered, because there was only one answer left. This ends now, Raphael said. We gave them mercy once. This time we end them. Plans began that night. Unlike last time, we were not weak. Nightshade was no longer rebuilding. It was fortified, trained, bonded, stronger than we'd ever been. And I would make sure this time we left no one standing. Chapter 17. Ashes Beneath the Victory. Luca's POV. War had a taste, metallic and bitter, like iron on the tongue, and it began long before the first drop of blood spilled. The War Council convened at midnight. Raphael stood at the head of the long stone table, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Kyan and I sat to his left, Mayra and Elias, our field medics, on the right. A map was spread before us, claw-marked and smudged, years of battles etched into it like scar tissue. They broke the contract, Raphael said. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. There's no turning back now. We planned everything, entry points, strike teams, escape paths if needed. Kyan and I would lead the north flank. Raphael himself would take the front. The goal was simple, a swift, overwhelming strike. No time for them to regroup. They won't expect a direct attack, Elias added. They'll be disoriented. But something in me was uneasy. I didn't voice it, not then. We'd waited too long. War was already coming. And through it all, I didn't see Melinda. She tried. She sought me out in corridors, called after me in the courtyard. But each time I brushed her off. I buried myself in strategy, in logistics, in training. Part of it was duty. This was my home, my people, and I had no space left for anything else. But part of it was something I couldn't name. An instinct, a whisper in my chest telling me that sharing too much with her would be a mistake. She wasn't part of the pack, not yet, and trust, I was learning, could be a very dangerous thing. When the night of the attack arrived, the moon was high and bruised behind a veil of clouds. We moved like shadows, silent, fast, deadly. We struck first. Or we were supposed to. Because the second we crossed Iron Fang's border, they were ready. Barricades already reinforced. Fires already lit. War cries rose into the air before we even hit their main line. Shit, Kyan muttered next to me, his blade drawn. They knew. We didn't stop. Couldn't stop. We fought. Claws against steel, bone against bone. The air reeked of blood and burnt fur. I saw Mayra dragged from the front and Elias bleeding down his temple. Kyan tore through enemies beside me like a storm, but even he grunted from a deep wound across his side. We were supposed to be swift. But we were caught. They were organized, vicious, ready. And for a moment, I thought we'd fall. But Nightshade didn't crumble. We rose. Our pack fought harder, smarter. We covered each other's backs, moved like one. When Raphael went down under 3 wolves, I was there before the 4th could reach him. And when Kyan staggered, blood trailing from his leg, Mayra leapt from behind and stabbed the attacker through the eye. Hours passed. By the time the final howl echoed in the trees, Iron Fang was broken. Their leader and a handful of loyalists had been captured. The rest were dead or had fled. Nightshade stood, but not unscathed. Injured bodies littered the clearing, growls became whimpers. Blood soaked the earth in too many places. We had no deaths, yet, but the cost was heavy. Later that night, we chained the captives in the holding barn. I watched from the shadows as Raphael questioned the Alpha's second-in-command, a cold, pale wolf with eyes like splinters of glass. He grinned, blood trailing down his chin. "You think this was victory?" Raphael growled, stepping forward. "You were supposed to be extinguished. Who gave you our intel?" The wolf spat blood at his feet. "You pathetic mutts let someone this close stab you in the back." My spine stiffened. Raphael stepped closer. "Who?" The wolf grinned wider. "Wouldn't you love to know?" Then he muttered something, low, almost inaudible. Mara leaned in. "What was that?" "I said," the wolf hissed, "look inside your pack. Your perfect little walls aren't as solid as you think." Then in one swift jerk he bit down hard on something hidden between his teeth. Poison. He choked, twitched, and died. Right there, right in front of us. A silence fell like a curtain. Someone had betrayed us. Someone inside the pack had passed our plans to Ironfang. And with the traitor still unknown, the pack that had just won a war began to unravel from within. No one said it aloud, but we all felt it. We weren't safe anymore. Not from them. Not from each other. Chapter 18. Unraveling Tension. The night had felt like it dragged on, the quiet after the battle almost deafening. The echoes of the fight were still in my mind, each step heavy with the weight of what had happened. The bloodied ground, the cries of the wounded, nothing was going to erase that from my memory anytime soon. The pack had held their ground, fought with everything they had, but the cost was high. And the worst part, the tension that hung thick in the air. It was everywhere I went, the looks exchanged between pack members, the whispers, the uncertainty. I couldn't escape it. I had managed to stay focused throughout the battle, protecting those I cared about, keeping my mind on the mission. But now there was too much to handle. The knowledge that someone within our own pack had betrayed us gnawed at my insides. How could we have been caught so off guard? How had they known we were coming? There was no other explanation except that someone had tipped them off. Raphael had gathered us for a meeting earlier in the day, and I could still feel the weight of his words. He was a leader, sure, but I had never seen him look so unsettled. He had a way of carrying himself, an air of confidence that was usually unshakable. But tonight, there was something in his eyes that suggested he didn't have all the answers, and that scared me. We talked about everything that had happened, how we had managed to win the fight, but how costly it had been. And then it came up, the traitor. "We need to dig into everyone who's joined recently," Raphael had said, his voice steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "We can't risk trusting anyone right now, not until we know who's behind this." I agreed with him, but the fairness of it bothered me. So many of those who had joined had fought bravely, battled beside us, bled for us. And now, just because a few had shown the signs of betrayal, we were questioning them. It didn't sit right with me. But we had no choice. We couldn't afford to let this slide. I knew that we had to be cautious, but as the hours passed, the weight of the decision wore on me. It wasn't just the betrayal that had me on edge. It was everything. The way the pack was reacting, the way we were all looking over our shoulders now. And there was another part of me, the part that had been quieter lately, that knew something was wrong with me. I hadn't seen Melinda much lately. I'd been pushing her away, not because I wanted to, but because I needed space to clear my head. I had responsibilities, and I couldn't let myself be distracted by emotions. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. There was something I wasn't ready to face, something I didn't know how to put into words. I walked into the infirmary later that evening, my gaze falling on the injured pack members who were being treated. The noise of the room was a mix of quiet conversations, the soft rustling of bandages, and the occasional wince of pain. Maddie was there, hovering near one of the beds. She had insisted on coming to help, and though I hadn't expected her to, I was grateful. Her knowledge of pharmacy was invaluable. The pack needed all the help it could get. I watched as she prepared supplies, moving with purpose. Her calmness amidst the chaos was a strange comfort, though it wasn't the kind I was used to feeling. When she saw me, her eyes softened, but there was no trace of the playful banter we used to share. Instead, she gave me a small, almost polite smile. I felt the usual tension in my chest tighten, but I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. "Luca, you okay?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice too rough, too empty. I wasn't fine, but I wasn't going to admit that. Not now. She seemed to want to ask more, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. I didn't blame her. We had both changed in the last few weeks, and things weren't the same between us anymore. The air between us was thick with things unsaid, unspoken. I turned my attention to the wounded again, trying to push the feeling away. "You're doing a good job," I muttered. She nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer before she turned back to the patient she had been working on. The silence stretched between us until Raphael entered the room, his expression grim. He gave Maddie a short nod, acknowledging her help, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "We need to talk," Raphael said to me, his tone sharp and serious. I nodded, my stomach tightening. There was no escaping this now. Chapter 19: Betrayal and Conflict. I had just finished scanning over the latest pack reports when Raphael called me in. The tension in his voice was unmistakable, the kind of weight that made you feel like something had gone terribly wrong. I didn't even need to ask what it was. I could feel the storm brewing, and it was heading straight for me. Raphael's office was dimly lit, the shadows clinging to the corners of the room as he motioned for me to sit down. Kyan was there, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more serious, something apologetic. That was the first sign that I should brace myself. Selene stood near the window, her posture sharp and defensive, her gaze never leaving me as I took my seat. "Luca, no matter what, this is something we need to address." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Raphael looked at me for a long moment, and I could tell he hated what he had to say next. There was something in his eyes that made me want to bristle, something that told me I wouldn't like what was coming. "We've found some things," he started, and I could see the discomfort in his face. "About Melinda." I froze. My heart skipped a beat as the word left his lips. Melinda. The one person I hadn't been able to trust myself to even keep at a distance, the one I should have been keeping close. Now I was hearing things that made my chest tighten. "She's connected to the Iron Fang pack," Raphael continued, his voice steady but filled with regret. "Her old coven. They were allies with them, and we have intelligence suggesting she's been in contact with them. She's not what she appears to be." My heart felt like it had dropped into my stomach. I stared at Raphael, unable to form words. Betrayal, disbelief, and anger twisted inside me all at once. I had known there was something off about Melinda, but to hear this, it felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open. She'd been hiding so much from me, and I had let it happen. "I didn't want to go behind your back," Raphael said, almost apologetically, but I could tell he was bracing for my reaction. "But it was necessary. We had to be sure. We've been keeping an eye on her, Luca. I couldn't risk the pack." I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening into fists. I could see why Raphael had done it. He was the alpha. He had to think of the pack first, but it didn't make it sting any less. I looked over at Kyan. He didn't speak, but his eyes mirrored the same regret I felt, the same apology that sat heavy in the air between us. "Luca," Kyan began softly, but I cut him off with a quick shake of my head. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't need to hear it. Selene stepped forward, her eyes narrowing slightly as she crossed her arms. "She's part of the coven," she said firmly. "I'll handle it myself. I've dealt with her kind before. She's my responsibility." But Kyan was having none of it. His normally steady gaze was sharp, his voice growing intense as he replied, "You don't get to handle her alone. She's an enemy to the pack now, Selene. You're not getting any special treatment. It was the first time I had seen Kyan lose his calm, the first time I had seen him truly riled up. The force of his words filled the room, and for a moment I wondered if they were about to come to blows. Selene met his gaze with equal intensity, and for a long second it felt like the air was thick with the tension of a coming storm. Finally, she exhaled sharply and spoke through clenched teeth. "Fine, but I'll be there to witness it. If anything goes wrong, I'll take full responsibility." Raphael nodded solemnly. "We'll do it your way, Selene, but the questioning will happen now." With a look of finality, the door was opened, and Melinda was escorted into the room. The change in her was almost immediate. Her sweet, innocent facade vanished the moment she entered, replaced with an icy coldness. It was like staring at a completely different person. The woman who had once seemed so vulnerable and soft was now someone I barely recognized. They wasted no time. Raphael, Kyan, and Selene, all of them grilled her with questions. The room felt suffocating as the accusations flew, and yet she didn't break. She held her ground for a while, but as the pressure mounted, cracks began to appear in her calm exterior. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. This was the woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I might spend my life with, but now she was a traitor, and with every passing minute the betrayal dug deeper into my chest. Then it happened. Her sweet, innocent smile faltered, replaced by a look of pure malice. It was the first time I saw her true face, and it sickened me. She was playing a role, one that she had crafted so well, and now it was falling apart. "I had no choice," she finally hissed, her voice cold and calculating. "My coven Ironfang, they have power. I was never going to be free." The truth hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt like I'd been physically knocked backward. She'd been playing me, all of us, this entire time. Melinda's punishment was swift. Raphael had no mercy. "You're banished," he said coldly, his voice unyielding. "You will leave this territory or I will have you killed." The words stung, but they were necessary. There was no place for someone like her here anymore. I watched her leave and something inside me broke. She was gone, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I should have been angry, furious at her betrayal, but all I could feel was emptiness. I felt stabbed, torn apart. My own mate, the one person I was supposed to trust above all, had chosen to betray us. "I'll take responsibility for this too," I said, my voice thick with emotion, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I'll leave the pack." Raphael's eyes widened, and for a split second I thought I saw a flash of disbelief cross his face. He leaned forward, his hands tightening into fists as he spoke. "No, Luca, you don't need to do this. This isn't your fault." I couldn't be like my father. I couldn't repeat his mistakes, no matter how much I felt like the weight of this betrayal was suffocating me. No matter how deeply it hurt, I couldn't let Melinda suffer alone in this. She was my mate, my responsibility. "I'm leaving," I said quietly, the decision already made. "I can't stay here. I won't turn my back on her. I'll suffer with her. She betrayed me, yes, but I won't let her carry this alone, not as long as I'm her mate." Raphael's face hardened, his voice low but filled with conviction. "Luca, don't do this. You'll destroy yourself. The pack needs you." "I won't be like him," I replied, my voice trembling with the force of my emotions. He didn't know how to respond, and I could see the battle waging in his mind. He knew why I had to do this, but he also knew the pack needed me. It needed all of us. "I'm leaving tonight," I said firmly. "I couldn't stay, not after everything." I turned to leave, but the headache returned in full force, sharper than before. It slammed into my skull like a vice, and for a moment, everything around me went dark. I staggered, my vision swimming, the weight of it all crushing me. Selene's sharp gaze snapped to me, her eyes narrowing. She could see the pain in my eyes, but she didn't say a word. I couldn't speak. The pain in my head was too much, and all I could do was focus on getting out of the room. I had to leave, and tonight I would, no matter what.
Chapter 20, Heartbreak. The day had been long, and my shift at the pharmacy dragged on longer than I'd hoped. The usual rush of customers, the endless supply checklists, and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, nothing seemed to help ease the restlessness that had been building in my chest all day. It was as if something was wrong, a dark cloud hovering just out of reach, waiting to finally break. I tried to push the feeling aside, but it lingered, gnawing at me as I locked up the pharmacy and stepped into the chilly evening air. The breeze kissed my skin, but it did nothing to calm the growing discomfort inside me. I had no idea what was coming, but I felt as though I was walking straight toward it. When I reached the pack house, I spotted Diana standing by the door, her expression tight with worry. I could see it in her eyes before she even spoke, the weight of something heavy that needed to be shared. "Maddie," she said, her voice unusually soft, "I need to talk to you." The air felt thick around me as I approached her. I could sense the tension in her stance, the way her fingers fidgeted nervously with the fabric of her sleeve. I braced myself for what I knew would come next. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "It's about Luca," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Melinda, she's been working with the Iron Fang pack. She betrayed us, and Luca, he's leaving today." The world around me stopped. Betrayal. The word echoed in my mind, over and over as if it couldn't possibly be real. I had been so sure about Melinda and Luca, about them, about their bond. The thought that she had played him all this time, used him, made my stomach churn. And Luca, the strong, confident man who had always seemed untouchable, was now leaving because of it. My heart sank in my chest. "Wait, he's leaving," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. My voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and hurt creeping in. Diana nodded, her gaze clouded with sorrow. "He feels like he has no choice. He can't stay here after everything that's happened. He's leaving the pack. He's leaving everything behind." I couldn't process it. My brain refused to accept what she was saying. Luca, leaving? After all he had done, after everything we'd been through? It didn't make sense. It felt like my heart was being torn in two, but I couldn't even bring myself to cry. All I could do was stand there, feeling hollow inside. Diana saw the look in my eyes and sighed. "Maddie, you need to talk to him, before it's too late." Without another word, I turned and ran. I didn't know where my legs were taking me, but I knew it would be to him. I had to see him, had to understand why he was doing this. I had to know if I could change his mind. The woods felt eerily quiet as I rushed through them, the moonlight casting strange shadows across the path. My heart was pounding in my chest, the rhythm frantic and erratic as I pushed forward. And then I saw him. Luca. He was standing by the edge of the forest, his back to me, his tall figure slumped as though the weight of the world was too much for him to carry. It wasn't the confident, imposing Luca I knew. This was a man completely broken, utterly defeated. My stomach twisted as I saw him like this. He looked so hollow, so unlike the man who had once been untouchable. I stopped in my tracks, unable to move for a few moments. The pain in my chest was almost unbearable. He looked as if he had given up on everything, on the pack, on himself, and on me. Luca finally turned, his eyes meeting mine, but there was no recognition in them, no spark. Only a dull emptiness that pierced my heart. "Maddie," his voice was a mere whisper, heavy with regret and sadness. "I didn't want you to see me like this." I took a step forward, my hands trembling, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. I didn't know what to say. There was so much I wanted to scream at him, so many things I wanted to ask, but instead I found myself staring at him, completely lost for words. "Luca," I finally managed, my voice cracking. "You can't leave. You don't have to do this. You don't have to leave the pack. You don't have to leave everything because of her." His gaze dropped to the ground, and he took a slow, deliberate breath. The tension between us was palpable. "I have to, Maddie," he said, each word heavy with finality. "I don't know any other way." I shook my head, stepping closer to him, my heart aching with every inch I closed. "But Luca, please, you don't have to do this, not like this." His eyes flicked to mine, and for the briefest moment there was a crack in his walls, a flicker of the man I knew, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He took another step back, his face going cold again. "I don't have a choice," he said, his voice a little more distant now. I need to go. I can't stay here with everything, not after everything she did. Before I could say anything more, he raised his hand, his fingers gently brushing against my cheek. It was the softest touch, almost like he was trying to reassure me. But before I could even process what had happened, he pulled his hand away as if it had burned him. "Take care, Maddie," he said, his voice breaking ever so slightly as he spoke. "I'm sorry, I need to go." I felt his words like a physical blow. He was saying goodbye. This wasn't a temporary separation. This was it. He was leaving, and I wasn't sure if I would ever see him again. The world around me seemed to disappear as he turned away, his broad back retreating further into the night. I stood there, frozen, my chest tight with an aching emptiness that was too much to bear. I couldn't stop the tears anymore. My heart had just started to mend from everything that had happened, and now it was breaking all over again. It felt like I was losing him again, but this time in a way that scared me. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance, and I was left standing in the cold, a hollow shell of the person I had been moments before. I didn't know when, or if, I would see him again. And that thought, that fear of never seeing him again, was the sharpest pain of all.
Chapter 21, A Brother's Burden. Raphael. The night had settled with a strange kind of stillness, one that never belonged in a place that used to feel like home. I stood on the balcony outside my office, the cool wind brushing against my skin, but it did nothing to calm the storm within me. Luca was gone. My brother, my best friend, the one person who had always been by my side through childhood brawls and bloody skirmishes, through heartbreaks and victories. He had been my constant in a world where leadership often meant isolation. We didn't need words to understand each other, never had, and now he was leaving the pack, leaving me. It felt like my world had stopped. I clenched the railing, my knuckles white from the force of it. I knew he was hurting. I knew his decision came from a place of guilt, of a warped sense of duty as a mate. But it didn't make it any easier to accept. I had tried, gods, I had begged him not to go, told him this wasn't his burden alone to bear, but the look in his eyes, he'd already made peace with the pain. He had chosen it. I felt lost, like the foundation beneath my feet had been yanked away, and I was free-falling through memories I couldn't hold onto. That's when I heard her footsteps, light but firm, Selene. She stopped beside me, not speaking at first. For a moment, we both just looked out into the dark woods, the silence sitting thick between us. Then she spoke, voice quiet, almost reverent. "I'm sorry, Raphael," she said. "I never intended for things to go this far. If it comes down to it, I'll pull my coven out. We'll leave." I turned to look at her, surprised. There was genuine remorse in her eyes, not just for Luca, but for all of it. For the way everything had unraveled so fast, so violently. "No," I said firmly, "you don't have to go. We've both fought too hard to make this alliance work, but I want protections. From now on, I reserve the right to do background checks on any new coven members that join your circle. No more surprises, no more secrets." She hesitated but then nodded, her expression softening. "Agreed, that's fair." The wind picked up again, and for a moment I thought the conversation was over, but then Selene turned to me, her brows knitting in concern. "There's something else," she said. "Before Luca left, I noticed something." I straightened, suddenly alert. "What?" She pursed her lips, then said, "His headaches." He was rubbing his temples, clearly in pain. I didn't say anything then, but it didn't feel normal. I know magic when I sense it. That wasn't stress or fatigue. I exhaled slowly, the pieces starting to click. "He's been having them for a while," I admitted. "He brushed it off when I asked, said it was just tension." Selene's expression shifted immediately, no longer just concerned, but alarmed. "Raphael, that could be something far more dangerous. It might not be just stress. If Melinda bewitched him," she trailed off, her voice hardening, "then he may not have been thinking clearly for a long time." A chill ran down my spine. The idea that my brother's choices, his pain, his guilt, could have all been manipulated. "He might still be under the influence," she continued. "I want to help. Let me check him. If there's any trace of enchantment or hexcraft, I'll find it. I can help undo it." My jaw tightened. I didn't want to believe that Luca, the strongest person I knew, had been so thoroughly deceived. But he had acted so strangely these past few weeks. His temper, his decisions, his insistence on taking the fall for Melinda, it hadn't felt like him. If there was even a chance she was right, I had to let her try. "Do it," I said quietly. "Anything you need, just bring my brother back to me." She nodded, her eyes full of quiet determination. I'll do everything I can. As she turned to leave, I looked back out into the night. Somewhere out there, Luca was wandering with the weight of a betrayal he didn't deserve on his shoulders. And if there was even a shred of hope that he wasn't lost, if this spell or influence could be broken, I would do everything in my power to make that happen. Because no matter what, Luca was my brother. And I would not lose him without a fight.
Chapter 22. A Shattered Veil. The trees were silent tonight. Too silent. No rustle of wind. No hoots. Not even the usual hum of life that lived just beyond the border. Just the crunch of my boots against the cold forest floor. I could already feel the bond of the pack pulling, stretching thin like thread drawn to its final tether. A few more steps and I'd be across the border. I'd be gone. And maybe then, Melinda wouldn't suffer alone. Maybe I'd finally be able to carry the guilt I deserved, if only to balance the scales of what it meant to be her mate, no matter what she had done. I wanted to suffer, not out of weakness but choice, because I couldn't be like my father. I couldn't pretend love was transactional. That loyalty had conditions. She had betrayed us all, yes, but I'd chosen her. That meant something. That had to. The edge of the territory was in sight when I heard the familiar thud of heavy paws behind me. I stopped, didn't turn, I already knew. "Raphael," I murmured. A low growl rippled through the silence. I didn't have to look to know his fur would be bristled, that his stance would be one of both defiance and grief. "Let me go," I said without turning. I finally heard the shift, the sound of bones cracking and reshaping, of flesh contorting and settling into human form. My brother stood behind me, breathing heavy. "No," he said, his voice raw, "you need to listen." I turned to face him, jaw clenched. "I've made my decision." "She thinks you've been bewitched," he said, cutting through everything else. My heart stuttered. "What?" "Selene noticed it," he said. "The headaches, the way you've been acting. She thinks Melinda might have done something, some spell, a manipulation." I stepped back. My pulse surged, rage igniting deep inside. "You think I was controlled, that none of this was mine, that my choices, my guilt were fake?" "No," Raphael said quickly, stepping forward. "I think someone took your pain and amplified it, twisted it. You're not yourself, Luca, you haven't been." The fury roared in my chest, not because he was wrong, but because if he was right, if Melinda had truly manipulated me to this extent, I wanted blood. "Take me to her," I snarled. Without another word, we shifted, my wolf tearing out of me with a roar that echoed through the forest like thunder, and we ran. Together. For once, not as Alpha and Beta, not even as pack brothers, but as two men desperate to pull back the veil that had been choking me. Selene was waiting when we arrived. Her coven was already preparing the circle, runes carved into the floor, herbs burning, candles lit with blue flame. She didn't say much, only looked at me with sadness and determination. "This may hurt," she warned, already stepping inside the circle, her voice laced with power. "But we need to undo whatever lingers." I stood in the center of the ritual space, and the moment her spell began, it was like 1,000 thorns pressing behind my eyes. She chanted, ancient words curling in the air like smoke, and then I felt it. A searing pain burst in my chest. I dropped to my knees, breath caught, vision darkening at the edges. Selene clutched her own chest suddenly, gasping. "There's more," she said, voice trembling. "Not just a spell. There's damage, deep damage. Your wolf, he's wounded. Badly. Someone hurt him, not just physically, spiritually. He's been caged." I was trembling now, my claws half shifted, unable to fully change, unable to stop it. The pain was unbearable, like pieces of me were being stitched back together too fast, too tight. "He needs healing," she said. "Let me help him." I don't remember how long it lasted. Minutes, hours, days. Time blurred. But when the magic finally died down, when her voice finally faded and the light in the runes dimmed, it was like I could breathe again. Like a curtain had lifted from inside me. I inhaled, and for the first time in weeks it felt clear. The fog was gone. The heaviness that had been sitting behind my eyes, my chest, it had vanished. And that's when I knew. I had been under something, some influence, some sick, subtle form of control. And the realization made my blood boil. She had used me, twisted the very thing I prided myself on, my loyalty, my sense of duty, into chains. No wonder my wolf had been distant, erratic, hurting. He'd been screaming for me to wake up, and I had ignored him. Selene looked at me carefully. "You're not broken, Luca," she said softly, "but you were manipulated. That doesn't make your pain any less real, but it means it wasn't entirely yours to bear." I stood slowly, my body still trembling from the aftershocks of the spell's reversal. The air felt clearer, my senses sharper, as if a fog had finally lifted from my mind. The ache in my chest was still there, but it no longer dragged me under. It was mine now, not something planted inside me. I could feel it, understand it, and I could bear it. The silence between us was thick. Raphael hadn't said anything since Selene's words. He just stood there, watching me, jaw clenched, eyes darker than usual. He was giving me space, but I could feel his tension, like a dam threatening to crack. I turned to him, and for a moment he looked like he was going to try one more time to talk me down. But he didn't. He just nodded, like he understood that something had shifted inside me for good. I looked at Selene. "Thank you," I said simply. She gave me a small nod, her expression softening. I exhaled slowly, shoulders finally sagging under the weight I'd carried for too long. But as I moved to leave, a sharp edge twisted in my gut, something darker, colder. Melinda. Even her name felt like poison on my tongue now. She had been banished. She was gone, but if she ever dared to step foot near me again, she wouldn't walk away. For her sake, she better never come close.
Chapter 23. The Flicker of Something New. I was a shell of myself, barely functioning behind the pharmacy counter. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, my hands moving on autopilot as I sorted prescriptions, labeled bottles, and nodded at customers I barely saw. After crying myself to sleep the night before, I hadn't expected anything from today, except maybe more silence, more ache. And then the bell above the door chimed. I didn't even look up at first. I was too tired, but something in the air shifted, something primal, a presence, a scent that gripped my heart before my brain could catch up. I looked up and saw him. Luca. My breath caught. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. He stood there, framed in the doorway, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. Then his eyes shifted. Just for a moment. Wolf-like, golden, dangerous, flickering with something raw, something barely held back. I saw him fighting it, whatever it was, his jaw clenched, shoulders tight. But what shook me more was the fact that he was here, after everything, after the storm, after thinking I'd never see him again. "You're back," I breathed. His eyes softened. "I am." That was all he said, but that look, it carved into me. He looked at me like I was something sacred, something he'd been aching for. It made me squirm, not in fear, but in the way I'd always secretly craved, like I was wanted, chosen. I wanted to ask why he was here, what changed, what this meant, but he beat me to it. "Will you have dinner with me tonight?" I blinked. What? Even before Melinda, even before everything fell apart, Luca never asked. We just collided, circled each other in moments. There was never an invitation, never a line so clean, so direct, it felt like a doorway. I stared a little too long. Questions warred in my mind, but my heart knew its answer before my lips did. I nodded. His lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "I'll pick you up at 8. Then he turned and walked out, leaving only the echo of his voice and the scent of pine, earth, and something new, something freer. I stood there frozen. Everything still hurt, everything was still tangled. But after months of emptiness, nights of hollow aching, and trying to forget the sound of his voice, something in me stirred. Something in me mended.
Chapter 24. Recognition. I walked through the woods with the weight of truth pressing on my chest like armor, heavy but grounding. The forest was quiet, unusually so. Even the birds seemed to sense something had shifted. Because something had. Maddie, my mate. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut the second I saw her again. No, before that. The second I caught her scent in the pharmacy. My wolf stirred so violently it was a miracle I didn't shift right there, rip through the skin, and claim her like instinct demanded. Every part of me, the man, the beast, the soul, had screamed for her. And I almost lost control. Almost. It scared me how close I'd come to crossing that line. My hands had trembled behind my back just to keep from touching her again. And when I did, just briefly, the day before I left, when I brushed her cheek without thinking, it was like my own skin burned. Because it wasn't mine to touch then. Not when I was still so twisted in the mess Melinda left behind. But now everything made sense. Why my wolf had felt closed off for months. Why I had always been drawn to Maddie like a moth to flame. Why her laugh that first night we crossed paths had frozen me mid-step. I hadn't even seen her yet, just heard her laugh from across the room. Loud, free, so alive. She was the opposite of me. And that's why she fit. Her curly hair, her fire, the way she challenged everything and didn't care what anyone thought. I noticed her long before I admitted it to myself. My human self had watched her from shadows while my wolf had waited, guarded, maybe too afraid to open himself again after everything that happened. I was an idiot. I should have known, should have seen it. When I reached the clearing, I saw Raphael waiting. He leaned against a tree like he'd been expecting me. When our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. A knowing. "You okay?" he asked, straight to the point. I exhaled hard, nodding once. "It's Maddie, she's my true mate." His mouth twitched, not into a smirk, into something softer. "I knew it," he said without skipping a beat. That startled a laugh out of me. He grinned. "You better win her over. That way, Diana gets her best friend close again, and I don't have to deal with her pouting about Maddie being distant." I rolled my eyes, but I didn't deny it, didn't argue. Because I would. I'd win Maddie over. Not just because she was my mate, not just because my soul craved her like air. But because this time, I wasn't going to screw it up. Not with her. Chapter 25, The Way She Looked at Me. I stood outside her place, trying to stay composed, but my wolf was pacing just beneath the surface. This was supposed to be simple, just dinner, just reconnecting. Then the door opened. And there she was. Maddie. Dressed in something soft, flowing, and completely unfair. Her curls framed her face like they had a mind of their own, and her lips curved into the smallest, most uncertain smile. But what really undid me was the blush rising on her cheeks as I walked toward her. Maddie had never blushed before. She challenged, she rolled her eyes, she scoffed, but now she was blushing. And that one tiny flush made me want her in ways I could barely control. "You look," I stopped, shook my head slightly, and offered my arm with a smirk. "Beautiful." She rolled her eyes, there she was, and muttered a soft thanks under her breath, but the blush deepened. I didn't push it. We drove in silence for a bit, the air between us charged. It was different tonight, not like the nights we used to meet under shadows and excuses. There was intention in tonight. There was hope. At the restaurant, we talked easily at first, about nothing, about everything. She teased me for ordering the same dish I always did, and I mocked her for trying to pronounce something in French and failing miserably. Her laughter, it was like music I hadn't heard in too long. And then something shifted. She leaned in, eyes sharp and playful. "So, what's the real reason you brought me here, Luca? Didn't peg you as the candle-lit dinner type." There it was. That spark. That fire I had fallen for without even realizing. I leaned back in my chair, watching her with a smirk I couldn't fight. There she is. She blinked, confused. "What?" "My girl," I said, voice low. "She's back." Something changed in her eyes when I said it. The teasing faded, replaced by something softer, vulnerable, but also aching. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. We just stared, and the weight of everything we'd held back pressed between us like gravity. The chemistry, it was thick, electric. My hands itched to touch her, to pull her closer, to finally feel her where she belonged. But I didn't. Not tonight. I had time, and I was going to do it right. I was going to win her completely, mind, body, and soul. No rush, no shortcuts. After dinner, I walked her to the truck, opened the door like a damn gentleman. She teased me for it, of course. As I drove her back, the silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, full of things unsaid. When we reached her place, she turned to me slowly, lips parted like she wanted to speak, but didn't. I just gave her a small smile. "Good night, Maddie." She nodded. "Good night, Luca." I waited until she went inside before I drove off, my chest full and my wolf finally quiet. Tonight wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.
Chapter 26, My Girl. The door clicked shut behind me. I stood there, barely breathing, listening to the sound of his truck pulling away. And then I screamed. Not in fear, not in pain. It was a sound ripped straight from the deepest part of me. A confused, cracked, wild cry of disbelief and joy and everything in between. The night before, I had cried myself to sleep, clutching a pillow like it was him, telling myself over and over that I would never see Luca again, that he was gone, that this ache inside me would just become another scar I had to live with. But now he came back. He looked at me like I was everything, and then he called me my girl. My girl. Those two words echoed in my head like a heartbeat. I pressed my back to the door, slid down to the floor, and wrapped my arms around my knees. My heart was thundering in my chest, but not from anxiety. For the first time in months, it was from something like hope. The way he looked at me tonight, it wasn't lust or habit or guilt. It was soft, reverent, like he saw me. Really saw me. And the part that scared me the most, it made me happy. So happy it hurt. Because I didn't know where this was going. I didn't know if I'd get to keep him. But for a moment, he had looked at me like I mattered more than anything. And for tonight, that was enough. Chapter 27, The Words We Did Say. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts, and I walked toward the door, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't entirely explain. When I opened it, there he was, Luca, standing on my doorstep with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. My breath caught in my throat. He looked even more breathtaking than I remembered. His hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes had that familiar intensity, yet there was a softness about him today, a softness that made my stomach flip. Before I could even speak, I let out a laugh, something light and teasing, and I said, "Flowers for me." Luca's gaze softened, but then, was that a hint of a blush coloring his cheeks? My breath hitched at the sight of this strong, formidable man suddenly shy. It was an unfamiliar vulnerability that I couldn't quite explain, and it melted me, leaving me unexpectedly undone. I thought you might like them, he said, his voice almost shy. It was like a moment of innocence in an otherwise stormy world. I laughed softly again, stepping closer and teasing him. "Well, I don't know, you might just be trying to make up for all that mess, huh?" He smiled at that, but it was so tender that it hurt a little. Without thinking, I reached out and kissed him, just a brief touch of lips, a flutter of something I couldn't control. As soon as I pulled away, shock flooded through me. What had I done? But then I looked up at him, my pulse hammering, and saw his eyes, the raw, hungry desire in them. He looked at me like I was something he needed. He took a step closer, his hand going to my face, cupping it gently. "Maddie," he murmured, his voice thick with something dangerous. But before he could say more, he pulled me to him, lips crashing against mine. It was everything I had been waiting for, and more. His kiss consumed me, leaving no room for anything else. But when we broke apart, Luca looked at me with a hint of hesitance in his eyes. "I didn't mean to rush you," he said softly, as if the world was suddenly too big for us. I couldn't hold back anymore." I looked at him, trying to find the words. "You want to go slow?" I whispered, not fully understanding the weight of it all. He shook his head slowly, as if that was never what he wanted. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't want to say it like that. I wanted to wait to be sure. But now that I've said it, I need you to understand." He hesitated, looking conflicted. "I know it's a lot, especially with everything that happened with Melinda, but I just want to go slow. I don't want to rush you." His vulnerability hit me harder than anything. This was Luca, strong, fierce Luca, showing me a side of him I hadn't expected. And in that moment, I realized how much I needed him to be this open with me, to not hold back. Before I even realized it, I reached for him again, pulling him into another kiss. This time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just about the desire, the attraction, it was about us. The kiss deepened, and I could feel his hesitation fade as he responded with urgency, with longing. There was something in the way we fit together, in the way his body moved against mine, that made it feel like we had always known each other. When we pulled apart again, breathless and flushed, I looked up at him, my heart pounding in my chest. His expression was unreadable at first, but then it softened. "I don't want to go slow," I whispered. "I'm not scared of this, Luca. I'm not scared of you." His eyes softened in response, and for a moment, I could see the relief in them. The burden he had been carrying seemed to lift, just a little, as if I had given him permission to let go of the walls he had built around himself. "You sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, searching my eyes for the answer. I nodded, my hands gently tracing his jaw. "I'm sure," I said firmly, "but this is what I want, no more waiting." His gaze intensified, and I could see the raw emotion flickering behind his eyes, desire, yes, but also something deeper. Something that felt like a promise. Without another word, he kissed me again, this time without holding back, without any hesitation. It was a kiss that spoke volumes, of all the words we hadn't said yet, of everything we were afraid to face but couldn't deny. And in that kiss I knew that this, whatever it was forever.
Chapter 28, Unspoken Truths. The morning light filtered in softly, warming the room with its gentle glow. I woke slowly, still lost in the comfort of her presence beside me. Maddie lay there, her face peaceful in her sleep, her hair splayed across the pillow like a halo. I could hardly believe she was here with me. The woman who had unknowingly pulled me from my own darkness, filling my world with light and warmth. I couldn't help but watch her for a few moments, just drinking in the sight of her. This woman, my woman, was mine and I was hers, and for the first time in years I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I couldn't resist the urge. I leaned over and kissed her forehead softly, my lips lingering there for a moment. Her eyes fluttered open, slowly meeting mine with that soft, sleepy smile that always made my heart flutter. "Good morning," she murmured, voice husky from sleep. "Good morning," I said, my voice low and warm. There was a moment of silence as we simply looked at each other, the weight of everything unspoken hanging in the air. I had so much to say, so much I'd kept locked away, and this morning, I couldn't keep it inside any longer. "Maddie," I started, my voice rough with emotion. She turned to face me fully, sensing the shift in the air. She squeezed my hand gently, a quiet encouragement for me to continue. "There's something I need to tell you," I said softly, my heart racing as I gathered my thoughts. She nodded, her eyes steady and calm. "You can tell me anything, Luca." I took a deep breath, knowing this wasn't going to be easy. When I first met you, I had no idea you were my mate, and that's something I regret every day. The words felt heavy as I spoke them, but they needed to be said. I know this sounds strange, but I've spent my life being closed off. My father, I hesitated, emotions stirring as I thought of him. He wasn't a good man, Maddie. He abused my mother and he was with other women all the time. And because of that, I closed myself off from everything. From love, from anything that could hurt me. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to let anyone in, especially not someone who could break me. She was quiet, just watching me with those soft eyes of hers, like she could see the pain I was still carrying. "I've been running from it for so long, even from you. When I first met you, it wasn't because I didn't feel something. I felt everything, but I didn't understand it. I thought I could ignore it, suppress it, and pretend like it didn't matter. I paused, my chest tightening as I forced myself to say the next words. But after everything that happened, after I realized what you meant to me, I was afraid. Afraid of what loving you would mean. Afraid of how much you could hurt me if I let myself fall. She was silent for a moment, processing what I'd said. And then, to my surprise, she smiled softly, as if understanding something that had taken me so long to comprehend. I understand, Luca, she said, her voice steady and calm. I get it. I can't imagine what it was like for you growing up, but I understand why you needed to protect yourself. And I understand why it took you time to recognize me as your mate. My breath hitched. I hadn't expected her to respond so easily, so kindly. It was as if she had peeled back all my layers in an instant and saw the broken parts of me without judgment, without hesitation. "You're not angry?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, her smile still there, soft and gentle. "No, I'm not angry. I just know that you've been through so much. And I'm not going anywhere, Luca. I'm here." I didn't know what to say to that. How could I put into words how much that meant to me? How much her understanding, her patience, had melted away every fear I'd harbored. Her words settled around me like a blanket, comforting, reassuring. And yet, I couldn't stop the flood of emotions rushing through me. The love I felt for her, the awe at how she could be so strong, so understanding despite everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the relief of her words wash over me. And then, as if on instinct, I pulled her close, kissing her deeply, feeling all my fear and pain vanish into the kiss. When we pulled away, I rested my forehead against hers, my breath shaky. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't have to thank me, Luca," she said softly. "You're everything I've ever wanted, and I just want you to know that." I kissed her again, this time slower, more tender, allowing all the love I had for her to pour into that single moment.
Epilogue, a new beginning. The pack was gathered in the clearing, their excited chatter filling the air as I stood next to Luca. His hand was wrapped around mine, and I could feel the warmth of his touch grounding me in a way that nothing else ever could. There had been so much uncertainty in the past, but now everything felt right. Luca turned to me, his gaze soft yet unwavering, and I could feel the unspoken bond between us, something that had been growing stronger with each passing day. "We wanted to share some news with all of you," Luca said, his voice strong as it carried over the clearing. I squeezed his hand, a rush of emotion hitting me as he looked down at me. "Maddie and I have decided to bond, to officially join as mates, and we're excited to announce that we'll be taking this step together as part of this pack." The words hung in the air for a moment before the clearing erupted in cheers and applause. I smiled through the tears that threatened to spill, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, the pain, the healing, and now, the love. The love I had for Luca. The love that had only grown stronger since we found each other. As the cheers died down, Kyan's voice rang out, breaking the moment with his usual teasing tone. Well, look at this," he said, stepping forward with that mischievous grin of his. "Maddie, I can't believe you're breaking my heart like this." I flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and amusement filling me as I looked at Kyan. "Kyan, I'm sorry," I started, but he just waved me off with a dramatic flourish. "I'm just messing with you," Kyan said, his grin widening as he shot Luca a playful look. "But seriously, take it easy on her, man. You break her heart, and you'll have me to answer to." I could feel Luca's grip tighten on my hand, his gaze sharpening as he looked at Kyan. There was a tension in the air now, but it wasn't hostile. It was protective and possessive. Luca's voice, though quiet, was firm. "I'll take care of her, I promise you that." Kyan raised an eyebrow, his playful smile never leaving his face. Okay, I was just joking," he said, holding his hands up in mock surrender. "But if anything goes wrong, you know where to find me," he added with a chuckle, looking at me. I laughed, glancing up at Luca with a teasing smile. I think Kyan just wanted to make sure I'm in good hands. Luca's eyes softened as he looked at me, his protective nature not fading even for a moment. "You're in the best hands," he said softly, his voice full of certainty. Kyan grinned and gave Luca a playful bow, acknowledging his words. "I'll hold you to that. No breaking her heart, okay?" The lightheartedness lingered for a moment, but as the others gathered around us to congratulate us, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of peace. This was it. This was what I had been waiting for, what we both had been waiting for. And despite all the challenges we'd faced, I knew we were ready. Luca pulled me closer, wrapping his arm around me. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly, his voice just for me. I looked up at him, feeling the weight of everything that had led us to this moment, and I couldn't help but smile. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. And as the pack continued to celebrate around us, I realized something. This was the beginning of something beautiful. The beginning of a life I never thought I could have, but now I knew I could. With Luca by my side, everything felt right.